विग्रहं त्रिनयनं माणिक्यमौली स्फुरत् तारानायकशेखरां स्मितमुखीमां मीनवक्षोरुहाम् पाणिभ्यामलिपूर्णरत्नचषकं रक्तोत्पलं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परामम्बिकाम् सततज्वर विषमज्वर ग्रह नक्षत्र दोषाञ्चान्या हर हर काली सर सर गौरी गम गम विद्ये आले माले काले बन्धे भज भज विद्ये मख मख विद्ये नाशय नाशय पापम् हर हर दुःस्वप्नम् विध्वंसय विध्वंसय
Namaste, dear friends. Susayam, Sumadhyanam, and Suprabhatam for you wherever you are in whichever part of the globe. So it's wonderful to have you back with us. We are on the 37th day of the Global Festival of Yogas to celebrate wellness. And this has been an amazing journey so far. And all of you have been fantastic co-passengers on this discovery of the different traditions of yoga. This morning we traveled a little bit east to look at Thai yoga as well as the Buddhist yoga and the Tibetan yoga techniques. The session was conducted by Zoltán Cézár from Hungary, Budapest, and he introduced us to different techniques of the yoga tradition. In this session, however, we are going to dive deep into the womb of the yogic sciences. And the one who is going to take us into that deep discovery is none other than a very dear anchor and co-curator of this festival, Dr. Vinayachandra Banavathy. So, Vinayji, may I request you to please come on screen? Namaste. And it gives us great pleasure to finally get to listen to you, because many participants have from a long time been requesting to listen to you, to listen to what you have to share from your own experience and teachings. So we are very, like Anil Kumar ji is immediately resonating with my words and saying a long awaited session today evening from Sri Vinay Chandra ji. So we am sure that what you have to share with us is something very special, because I've had the great honor and privilege of being a co-passenger and co-traveler with you on several yoga journeys across the world. And one thing that all the students of these various workshops that we have co-conducted will agree is that whatever angles I might bring to it, they always turn to you for giving them a proper form, the Shastrik, a great Shastric analytic approach to understanding this ancient knowledge tradition. And the best part of it is that you normally do it in a very accessible manner. So about the Upanishads itself, there are several great people across the world who have spoken extremely highly about them. We have, for example, Eknath Ishwaran, one of the very contemporary writers on the Upanishads and a big favorite author of Vinayji's. So he's writes, he says, yet the Upanishads are not philosophy, they are darshana, something seen, and the student to whom they were taught as expected, was expected not only to listen to the words, but to realize them. That is, to make their truths an integral part of conduct and consciousness. So the Upanishads themselves are not often so easily are not so easily comprehensible because the language is a little cryptic. So we need to sit closer to literally have an Upanishadic session with those who have spent substantial number of years studying these texts under great masters. So Vinayji is one such student of the Upanishads, a very dedicated and committed student of the Upanishads, as he grew up in the Veda Vijnana Gurukulam near Bangalore, which was dedicated to the study of the Shastras. We had Dr. Ramchandra Bhatt, who spoke to us on Guru Purnima Day. He was the senior Acharya who founded that Gurukulam. So Vinay has been blessed by the satsanga of many great scholars and teachers, including Dr. Nagendra from the S. Vyasa University. A little formal note on Vinaya. So Vinayji is the head of the Indica Yoga that has offered this wonderful treat to all of us. And this platform is dedicated to this authentic, immersive and transformative yogic experience, something that he's personally very committed to. He is also the founder of Takshashila Institute of India Studies, and this institute is committed to trying to promote study as well as research into these Indian knowledge systems. Through this particular platform, we welcome study programs for foreign students to come and discover the marvel that is India. So Vinaya organizes, or he facilitates these programs for different groups across the world. He also holds a PhD in Sanskrit on a very important topic, the idea of rhythm in the Vedas. And we were fortunate to have done it under the same guide from Pondicherry University, Professor K.E. Dharanidharan. And I'll just take this opportunity to offer our sincere pranams, because when I shared it on Facebook, he was the first one to send his ashirvads to you to have a very successful sharing on this platform. Besides that, he's done a master's in Sanskrit and English and Yogic Sciences from S. Vyasa University, and done his applied psychology as well. He brings in his understanding of psychology and the philosophy of the yogic texts in the different sessions that he conducts across the globe. He has earlier worked as a senior consultant for the National Education Policy Drafting Committee in charge of language and culture education. And much before that, he was also a research associate at the Karnataka Knowledge Commission. So education is another very important point that is close to his heart. So Vinayachandra is a dedicated teacher, as I've told you, who has traveled across various continents, and he believes in bringing this blend of yoga, psychology, and Sanskrit. His inspiration has been the Gurukulam in Bangalore, which, if any of you has a chance to visit, you must make it a point to go and soak yourselves in that blissful atmosphere of the Gurukulam. And I can assure you, you'd want to go back there several times in your life. It's not a one-time visit. His publications include the report of the standardization of yoga terminologies for WHO, a book which he co-edited with me called Perspectives on Indian Psychology, published by Jain University. And he has also co-authored another book titled Happiness Indian Perspectives, which has been published by the Development Foundation, a organization that is dedicated to promoting Indic concepts to development. Besides this, he has several articles and papers in different books on and booklets on yoga, Indian psychology, and spirituality. So with these few words, it's a great pleasure, Vinayji, to have you in our midst, and we are looking forward. I'll not stand between you and the audience. I request everybody here to please mute your mics, as well as if you have any questions. With these few words, Dr. Vinayachandra, over to you.
Yeah, no, before that, it's over to me first. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Vinay for, on behalf of Indic Academy, when we started talking to him almost 1.5 years back. And I think Vinay is a, I would say, to describe him, he's a yogacharya. So he's the course that we are trying to create people like Vinay. He's a yogi, and we are extraordinarily fortunate to have him in our midst, heading this vertical. And of course, Anuradha is also there curating, and we are really grateful to both of them for doing such a fantastic job. So I just wanted to thank you, Vinay, and thank you, Anu. Yeah.
Sabhaye namaha, sabhasadbhyo namaha, Shri Gurubhyo namaha, Harihi Om. I thank Anuradha ji and Hari Kiran ji for a very generous showering of praises and also introducing me. But I'm reminded of the words of Dr. Stephen Parker, who was here earlier as a speaker, where he mentioned our only eligibility, our only identity is our teachers. I would like to add our teachers as well as our mentors. I have been very fortunate to be guided by great masters who were selfless in their approach, in their sharing of their knowledge, and mentoring me at various stages of my life. So I had teachers like Ramchandra Bhattji, who was the founder of Veda Vijnana Gurukulam, and my guide, as Anu mentioned, Professor K. Dharani Dharanji. So much of Chhatra Vatsalya, affection towards their students. So the only identity I possess is I have been their student. That's it. And also I have been grateful to mentors who have received along my way, whether it is Professor M.K. Sridhar, who will be speaking in next couple of days, or Shri M.P. Kumar, or our own Hari Kiran ji. Many of you might just heard Hari Kiran ji, but you might have not known him because he's the man always behind the screen. If everything is happening in the name of Indica, I would like to mention that this is one big event, as you can see, happening. But under Indica, this is not the only event. This is just one of the events that is taking place, because simultaneously we have about 5 to 6 platforms, and each platform is active like this. So if there is one man who has been architecting all these things, that is Hari Kiran Vadlamani ji, the founder of Indica Academy, and the facilitator for all the activity. In fact, he is the head the brain and the heart and the hands for all these activities that are unfolding in the name of Indica. So I have been always grateful to all of them. And I also would like to mention the unconditional support that I have received from my family, my parents, because it would not have been difficult even to run this festival without their support. I have been spending nearly 2.5 hours, for each session. So about 3 sessions were there in a day. So 7 to 8 hours in front of the screen, and everything was functioning smoothly at home. Thanks to my parents, my brother, sister-in-law, my wife, and my kids. In fact, I was able to meet my kids and my family only twice this entire month. So I'm grateful to all of them, because it's because of them I get the credit, but it's all because of them. So with these words of gratitude, I would like to jump into a subject which is very dear to me. And I also would like to put a caveat at the moment. In the beginning of Raghuvamsha of Kalidasa, he says this: Pranshulabhye phale lobad udbahuriva vamanaha. He says, I am like a dwarf who is attempting to pluck fruits from a tree that is very tall. Knowing that still I'm a Vamana, that's exactly my situation and my condition now. I'm attempting to do something, being very greedy. Pranchulabhe phale lobhat, he said. Being greedy in nature, I'm extending my hand so high, I don't know if I'll be able to get those fruits. I'm in a similar situation where I enjoy Upanishads so much, I want to present too many things. I don't know what I'll be able to do in this time, but still I'll make an honest attempt, and I'll just would like to share what I enjoy most of the Upanishads. So with these words, I'd like to begin with the Shanti Mantra, Sahana Bhavatu. So I request all of you to join in and chant it. All those who know, you can chant it, you can join us along. Sit comfortably with your back straight. Shoulders resting. Take a deep breath. Avavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishahai.
Om
Shanti Shanti. I'll be using some slides, but I also would like to go beyond the slides. So, but initially for the initial introduction of the focus area that we will be looking into, for the initial part, I'll be using it. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it's fine.
So Upanishads, the fountainhead of yogic wisdom. Why would I call it like that? Why? Because Upanishad belongs to the Vedantic tradition, and we are looking into the whole world of yoga, various dimensions of yoga in this festival. But how can I call Upanishads as the fountainhead of yogic wisdom? This is what we will be exploring it in next 1.5 hours. Before we begin with anything, I would just like to take you through a couple of quotes on Upanishads by the greatest masters of our times. I'm just trying to get the slide move. Okay. So Swami Vivekananda, who is one of the Jains of Vedantic tradition, in fact, a lion-like personality who who declared the Vedantic wisdom to the world in the modern times, he says, The Upanishads are the great mine of strength. Therein lies strength enough to invigorate the whole world. The whole world can be vivified, made strong, energized through them. They will call with trumpet voice upon the weak, the miserable, and the downtrodden of all races. I want you to note this. They will call with trumpet voice upon the weak, the miserable, and the downtrodden of all races, all creeds, and all sects to stand on their feet and be free. Freedom, physical freedom, mental freedom, and spiritual freedom are the watchwords of the Upanishads. The way he goes on speaking about the Upanishads and what they offer, it's enormous. So if one needs to have an immersion into Upanishads, then definitely Vivekananda is one of the main doors through which one can enter. Going further, my other great teacher, my guide is Sri Aurobindo, who says, the Upanishads are the supreme work of the Indian mind, and that it should be so, that the highest self-expression of its genius, its sublimest poetry, its greatest creation of thought and word should be not a literary or poetical masterpiece of the ordinary kind, but a large flood of spiritual revelation of this direct and profound character is a significant fact, evidence of a unique mentality and unusual turn of spirit. He's looking at what spirit created this Upanishad, what could be those minds which came up with these revelations. And going on further, I'll just quote from two thinkers who were very well acquainted with the Indian thought and the Indian traditions. So one is Maurice Bloomfield and the other one is Max Muller. I hope my screen.
Vinay, we are able to see. You've muted by mistake.
I'm sorry. So Maurice Bloomfield, in his book on the religion of the Veda, he says, there is no important form of Hindu thought, heterodox Buddhism included, which is not rooted in the Vedas. This is a very profound statement, I would say, and I want you to mark this, which we'll be exploring through our discussion this evening. So every school of thought, I mean, I cannot single out anyone, every single school of thought that has found its emergence in India has been profoundly influenced by Upanishads, even to the extent what we call so-called secularism. I mean, today we see some sort of a distorted version of secularism playing in India, but if there has to be a true secularism, even then that has to be influenced and guided by the Upanishads, and that's the influence of the Upanishads. Include the Buddhist traditions, many other traditions. In fact, in one of the texts, Swami Ranganathananda shows how Upanishad has also impacted the Indian Christianity and the Indian Islam to certain extents. And I have many friends in Europe, especially belonging to a school called School of Philosophy and Economic Science, who by the virtue of their learning, or by the virtue of what they have received, they adopt the Vedantic way of life, but they still continue to belong to their own religions. And they say they are able to appreciate their own religion, the mother religion, much better once they have been introduced to Vedanta. And going further, there's also this note from Max Muller, who was one of the greatest scholars. Of course, there are many other not accusations, but there are many other points of view that is presented on Max Muller and the purpose with which he started his work. Setting all those things aside, there are few lectures that he gives at the end of his life's work. One is the lectures on Vedanta philosophy, and there's also one lecture series called What India Can Teach Us. These are exemplary work. If anyone wants to really appreciate the Indic thought tradition, they need to look into it. And in the lectures on Vedanta philosophy, he says, it is surely astounding that such a system of Vedanta that is emerging out of the Upanishads should have been slowly elaborated by the indefatigable and intrepid thinkers of India thousands of years ago. A system that even now makes us feel giddy. He says it's almost like going up through a Gothic spiral, especially when you go up, you can feel giddy. Like that's exactly the feeling when we look into the thoughts that are presented in the Vedantic system. He says, again, mark these lines. He says, none of our philosophers, not excepting Heraclitus, Plato, Kant, or Hegel has ventured to erect a spire, never frightened by storms or lightning. I mean, this is such a profound statement where he says, the mind that saw the Upanishads, the seers who saw the Upanishads, they were so bold in their attempt to present truth as bare as it could be. So this actually, these four statements bring us, highlights many aspects of the Upanishads. One, the outcome of engagement with the Upanishads. Swami Vivekananda says freedom. Sri Aurobindo looks into the mind, the finest mind that has created the Upanishads, and Maurice Bloomfield presents about the encompassing and all impacting nature of the Upanishads, and the statement of Max Miller looks into the relentless pursuit of truth of the Upanishads that we can see. So with this brief background, I would like now to proceed into a question which I would like to ask you at the moment. What do you think are the foundational ideas of the yoga world? Because that's where we need to bring the connection. So we use many concepts, many underlying principles in the field of yoga. What are those concepts that we use and develop the entire stream of yoga? So if you can type it down in the chat box, and I request Anuji to kindly read it out for me. Just one thing that comes to your mind quickly.
So Vinita ji is saying it's unity, George ji is saying faith, Lalita ji saying integration, Raghavan ji humanness, Philip Montano Socaris unity, Lalita ji peace, Manish Pajan harmony of mind, wellness, Tyagaraja ji, Arnab ji death and the ultimate master of death of the ultimate master, Shraddha union of oneness. It's coming very fast now. Yoga and separate darshan. Yoga is separate darshan and unifying force, master, Vijnanamaya kosha, Vedanta, liberation, unity of mind, body and soul, unity with the divine inside, pursuit of modern ultimate knowledge, balance, way of life, salvation, connecting to consciousness, union of body, mind and soul, unity with self, physical and mental connect, fearlessness, self-realization, oneness, overall health, consciousness, getting closer to universal consciousness, divinity. Anything can be united, aimed to oneness, identifying oneself, moksha, sadhana, discipline, sadhana chatushtayam, stress relief and from exercise, immaculate breath, from Patricia, that was peace with Om, self-awareness, connect to breath, Radha Krishnan ji, yeah. Understanding ourselves from the deepest level, moving to spirituality, way of living, joining the divine with the human vehicle, yoga chittavriti nirodha, love, one with Brahman, Atman is Brahman, sadhana chatushtayam, wellness, attention. Yes,
Thank you. I think the list is going on. What I want you to is kindly hold these thoughts, whatever you have put in, whatever others have shared. Do remember this, and we will come back to them in a short while.
Sanjeev Balanji says attention, so hold that.
So this was just an exercise. I mean, I'll quickly look into some technical aspects. I don't want to spend much time on this because I know there are many senior sadhakas who have joined us throughout this 1 month or more than a month-long festival. But because there are many new people who might have joined, for their benefit, I have just put the meaning of the term Upanishad. Etymologically, this is the beauty of Sanskrit. I would like to connect with what Anuji had shared earlier. Like with Sanskrit, you can actually go to the roots and understand. The moment you can connect to the roots and you know how the word is derived, you can really think, I mean, you'll feel it actually that, there cannot have been a better word to denote this. And that's exactly what happens with most of the words that we use in Sanskrit. So again, etymologically looking at the term Upanishad, it has two prefixes, upa and ni, and the dhatu or the main root form of the term is shad or sad. And Shankaracharya, in his commentary on Kathopanishad, in the first part, again, I'm just tempted to say this. In order to understand these texts, no doubt going to the text through their original source is always important, but I have always found it beneficial to go to them through the works of Shankara, Acharya Shankara. I don't see anyone having such clarity of thought. And every time, as I was telling earlier, the Chhatra Vatsalya, his love for student is so enormous that he ensures he defines each and every term that comes in. He makes sure that the word is made clear, and only then he goes on to explain it further. So in Kathopanishad, the first paragraph or the opening part, he explains this term. He says, the term Shad or Sad, the root has three meanings: Gati, Visharana and Avasada. Gati means movement, Visharana means loosening, Avasada means annihilation. You might wonder, what do they have to do with the term Upanishad? Going further, the prefix upa means close, something that is near, and ni, the prefix ni, means that something that is sacred or secret. Generally, we translate the term Upanishad as a knowledge that is given to a student who is close to the teacher. But if you have to look into further details of it, if I have to summarize it, it means it is the sacred and secret knowledge which liberates one from a limited existence. So that's what it means by loosening and annihilation, loosening the bonds of samsara, annihilating. So fine, you start with loosening, finally it will annihilate, it will remove those bondages and set you free. And that is the movement towards, once it is set free, you become one with the highest. So that is the movement towards Brahman. So that's where you have these three meanings: movement, loosening, and annihilation. So it is the secret and sacred knowledge which liberates one from the limited existence that is passed on to a student who is close to the teacher. By the term close to the teacher, it means the one who is initiated, one who is willing to walk the path. And we'll see in a short while, what does it mean to say one who is willing to walk the path. Going further, just in terms of helping you to locate the place of Upanishads, this is a very generic scheme to understand the Vedic literature. You have 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharvana Veda, and you have 4 collections of texts within each one of them. So there is Samhita, there is Brahmana, there is Aranyaka, and there is Upanishad. And if you can look at the matrix, so it implies there is a Rig Samhita, there is a Rig Brahmana, there is a Rig Aranyaka, and there is a Rig Upanishad. And similarly for each of the 4 Vedas. So with all the permutation and combinations and with branches and sub-branches, Patanjali, who has commented on the sutras of Panini. So we have Patanjali who has written the Yoga Sutra. We have a Patanjali, which many in the tradition, many of us believe is the same Patanjali, who has written a very detailed commentary on the text of grammar, where he mentions at his time there were 1131 branches of Vedic learning. So for example, they say in Samaveda itself there were more than 1000 branches. So many Samaveda Samhitas, many Samaveda Brahmanas, many Samaveda Aranyakas, and many Samaveda Upanishads. So this is how the knowledge was categorized and presented. And unfortunately, we are left with less than 8 to 9 branches of learning today. Going further, so we have many Upanishads. Again, I don't want to get into those details. Some say there are 200, some say there are 120, some say there are 10 to 15. But what we take as the principal Upanishads are these 10. I'll again show you the list to you. And we have them classified under different Vedas. For example, under Rig Veda, we have Aitareya Upanishad. Under Yajur Veda, we have 4 Upanishads: Ishavasya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Kathopanishad, and Taittiriya Upanishad. And under Samaveda, we have 2 beautiful Upanishads, Kena and Chandogya. And in Atharva, we have Prashna, Mundaka, and Mandukya. So if I have to just present them together, the 10 principal Upanishads are Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitareya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka. I want you to repeat after me: Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitareya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka. Why do we call them as the 10 principal Upanishads? One is definitely because of their antiquity, and second, Acharya Shankara has commented on each one of them. And in fact, we can never be thankful enough to what Shankaracharya has done. These texts were always there, but someone who could give them the place of eminence and show it to people and see, if you have to look into the foundational texts of your tradition, this is where you need to look into, and has put efforts, taken trouble to give a detailed commentary on each one of them. So these are the 10 Upanishads, and along with that, we have another 3-4 Upanishads which are also considered to be extremely important. One such Upanishad is Shvetashvatara, which Acharya Shankara refers to in many places in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya and many other commentaries. And we also have Kaushitiki Upanishad, and we have few other Upanishads also which he uses or refers to often in his commentaries. Apart from these, there are many other Upanishads as well. So there are some sections or some compilations put together called Shaiva Upanishads, Vaishnava Upanishads. We have about 20 Upanishads which were published somewhere in the early 20th century by the Adyar Library, and they have been called as the Yoga Upanishads. To look into the various angas that are mentioned in the yoga tradition, to look into the yamas, niyamas, all these details, there are specialized Upanishads, and they are Yoga Upanishads, which are being published by the Adyar Library. So this is a general understanding of the Upanishadic literature. I don't want to spend more time on these technical aspects. With this, I will move on to what actually, why do we think Upanishads are so important, and what do they have to offer to us? So one of the other things that is the Upanishads are going to be so important is the 4 Mahavakyas. Maybe I'll revisit these Mahavakyas a little later or at the end of the presentation. We identify 4 Mahavakyas. Again, the credit goes to Acharya Shankara for identifying 4 short statements across the 4 Vedas and giving it to us as the Mahavakyas. And not only the identification is important, but also the sequential presentation of them. It's so important. And in just, it actually summarizes the approach of Vedanta, the yoga tradition or the Indic tradition at large. The first one is statement of definition, what we call as Lakshana Vakya. You define something here. And what are we defining? Prajnanam Brahma. So the ultimate thing, the ultimate reality, what the Upanishads identify is Brahman. And what is it? What is the nature of that Brahman? That is Prajnanam. That is consciousness. So this is the statement of definition. This is the beginning of knowledge. I want you to note this, where we are heading towards. So this is the beginning. The quest does not stop here. Next comes Upadesha Vakya, where the teacher says, the guide or the philosopher, he says, Tattvamasi. Brahman is consciousness. Now you are that. So it's not enough to know what is the highest. The next step is, what is its relation to me? Because everything has to be related to me. I cannot have something that is unrelated to me or something that is unconnected to me. So if there is something highest, I need to know it, I need to experience it. Therefore, we have the second Vakya, the statement, second big statement or the great statement, which is Upadesha Vakya, Tattvamasi, where the teacher says, you are that. The first statement is from Aitareya Upanishad, which belongs to the Rig Veda. The second statement is from Chandogya Upanishad, that belongs to Samaveda. And third, this is again an important step. See the linear and the progression of thought, how it is unfolding. The first one was definition, second one was instruction, and the third one was the period for reflection. Fine. I mean, the teacher has defined the ultimate thing as Brahman, and that's the nature of that is consciousness, and it has these aspects as its nature. But he also said that I am that. Does my experience relate to it? I don't feel myself to be that highest. I feel limited. I feel bound. I feel pulled down and chained. I have pain and suffering. Whereas the Brahman, the ultimate, seems to be one without any shackles. So where is the connection? Where is the relation? So this kind of mananam, where you gloss over this idea and try to relate what part of me is that universal in nature, what part of me is related in nature. So doing all these reflection, finally the student arrives at an understanding where he says, Aham Brahmasmi. This is the statement of experience. So fine, there is a part that is limited in me, but there is also something that can easily connect with that highest. So what are those aspects? He looks into that with the hair-splitting rational mind, and also with the profound shraddha he has towards the word of the teacher, and also building upon his own experience, he arrives at this ultimate understanding that Aham Brahmasmi, and with this, the progression of knowledge culminates. So this is the approach of that Vedanta lays out in a very clear, unambiguous manner, and this actually follows in all the Indic traditions, and yoga picks it up from this also. Look what is happening at the moment. An intellectual idea. When the definition was made, Prajnanam Brahma, it was an idea, it was a thought. A sharp mind can arrive at any idea or many ideas, but the journey still continues, and it finally has to arrive at its destination, and that is experience. Again, Acharya Shankara, in the commentary of Brahma Sutras, in the initial part, he writes, Anubhava avasaranatvat brahmajnanasya. So this brahmajnana that we speak about, the knowledge of this highest order, has its culmination in experience. If it does not speak to your experience, throw it. He never hesitates. I mean, this is exactly sets this tradition completely apart from all the traditions which belong to the books. This has nothing to do with the books. This has to ultimately speak to your experience. If it speaks to your experience, it is good. If it doesn't speak, throw it away. I mean, I don't mind making this statement. If a book of my own tradition, if it does not connect with my experience, having followed all the instructions given there with that same rigor, if it still doesn't speak to my experiences, I shouldn't have any hesitation to throw it away, because this is not dependent on any text. That the wisdom of the text becomes important because my experience can also connect with it. Again, I would like to bring your attention to Sri Ramana, one of the greatest sages of our times. He never read any text initially. He had never had an education or a training in Sanskrit or in Upanishads or any of these texts for that matter. He had some profound experience. And many years later, when he started looking into these texts, he used to say, this was my experience. And this is exactly the beauty of this tradition, that these ideas are important not because so and so text has said it. These ideas are important because they can be verified through experience. Then this is something very important that we need to keep in mind through and through. We will be returning back to this idea again and again. But this is in just the 4 Mahavakyas, starting from the Lakshana Vakya, statement of definition, statement of instruction, that is Upadesha Vakya. The third, Pratyabhijna Vakya, I am Atma Brahma. And the fourth one, that is Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, the experiential statement. This is the sequence of flow of thought in the Upanishads. So going further now, what is the approach of the Upanishads? Why does it become so fascinating to look into the Upanishads? Why one can have so much of joy in reading them? So these are some of the features I can say. That one, they have fascinating and dramatic stories. The stories are really fascinating. Maybe if time permits, I'll just take you through a couple of stories. And they also have a very dramatic setting. We'll look into one Upanishad and I'll try to bring out these features. But take any Upanishad for that matter, or most of the Upanishads, you can find a dramatic setting where the story unfolds. And through that story, there is a very beautiful and thought-provoking dialogue that emerges of it. Whether in the case of Kathopanishad, which we'll be looking into shortly, the dialogue or the exchange between Yama and Nachiketa, or you take Brihadaranyaka, there you have 4 people there, Janaka, Yajnavalkya, Maitreyi and Gargi. In fact, It's Gargi who goes on with her questions to Yajnavalkya, and at some point Yajnavalkya is so fed up, he says, please shut up. I mean, he's not able to answer, or he just says, please stop now, we have better things to do. So you have, as I said, dramatic stories and also thought-provoking dialogues. Why would I say thought-provoking dialogues? Again, in the same Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is an exchange that is taking place between Yajnavalkya and his two wives. So he, at some point of time, he decides to distribute his property among his two wives and go on a spiritual mission. Maybe the very reason that he wanted to take the spiritual mission was the presence of two wives. We don't know. We are not privy to that information. But at some point he wants to move on, and then he calls both of them and he asks, "I have all these things. Can I share it with you both? What do you want? Like, you please select, or you please let me know your preference. I'll distribute this wealth, and then I need to go." And then at that point, Maitreyi interjects and she asks, she says, fine, you have decided to distribute the wealth and the property. Can you give me that thing by which enam amrita syam, by which I can attain immortality? Again, this is one underlying and all-encompassing thought that you can see across the Upanishads. How can one attain immortality? The quest, the relentless pursuit towards immortality is again and again a recurring theme. Again, Maitreyi asks, can you give me something? You say, fine, you want to distribute. Can you give me that thing by which I can be immortal in my being, in my presence? And the dialogue starts and continues. And at the end, I mean, there's such a profound statement that emerges where he says, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. For the sake of the self, everything becomes dear to one. And this is such a profound statement which could be understood at a very superficial level, makes sense. It's a statement which can be understood at the highest of the levels of depth. So for the sake of self, everything becomes dear. What does one mean by it? Why does, in relationships, we can always see, why do we like other person? Because that the presence of the other person comforts me. Somewhere it adds to my, or it comforts my ego being, it comforts, it pleases me. But just imagine when we all say, I love you so much, I like your presence, but the very day that the other person is not adding that value to your life, what will be the relationship? Will I still continue to hold the same kind of liking to that person? Is something that we need to call into question, but that may not happen so. Things might change. The entire equation might get changed and altered because the presence of that person may not be as comforting as it used to be. So, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. For the sake of my own self, even when I say I love you, it's actually for my own self I'm making this statement. So this is at one level, but at the other level, the highest level of understanding, or the highest level of one's own being, one can understand it in a way that for the sake of the self, that deepest self, the true self, for the sake of the self, everything becomes dear because there is nothing other than it. Whether in this person or that person, it's the same being that exists, and this being expands to that degree and to that distance where everything is part of it, and therefore everything becomes dear to it. So this profound statement emerges in that dialogue. In this way, all these, even the statement of Tattvamasi that we looked into from Chandogya Upanishad, also comes from a dialogue between, again, a beautiful story of Shvetaketu and his father. So in this way, there are fascinating stories, thought-provoking dialogues, and I should also say the poetry is charming. I mean, if you have to really enjoy poetry, beautiful poetry of a mind which had no shackles, which was not bound, the boundless spirit in its all full, I mean, in its full-throated ease, you should look into the poetry of the Upanishads. You have this statement, Natatra Suryo Bhati Nachandratarakam Nema Vidyuto Bhanti Kutoyam Agnihi Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Sarvam Tasya Bhasa Sarvamiram Vipa. So, which says that the stars, the sky, everything, I mean, including the sun, the moon, the stars, everything shines forth, not because of their own light, but because of the presence of the consciousness behind. So this idea, this kind of poetry, I mean, with various kinds of beautiful imageries, I should say. Again, we'll be looking into Kathopanishad. I'll give you a few examples there. So all these, I mean, may go into the making of charming poetry. And there's also a presence of deep or deepest mysticism that you can come across. Take the, for that matter, the Ishavasya Upanishad, where it says, Tadejati, Tanai uh, where the ultimate reality, he says, it is one which trembles and trembles not. I mean, see the language also becomes so cryptic and mystic, because again, one needs to understand this concept that for a simple experience, a simple language will do. But as you get into the depth of things, look at the mathematics is also a language. When you get into the matrix, or when you get into the integration calculus, I mean, it's a completely of a different language, different nature. So the nature of the language of the Upanishads also can become as cryptic as that at some point of time, where deep mysticism is involved. And going further, I would like to say, Upanishads offer us some of the boldest declarations of humanity. I don't think there is any other parallel in any other textual tradition of the world where you can find such declarations. One such I would like to quote. I will now quote only the part of it. I'll keep the other part for the later example, where you have this in Shvetashvatara Upanishad, where it says, Shunvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putraha. I mean, see the way it addresses everyone. Amritasya Putraha, you are the sons of immortality. You are the sons of the divine sparkle. I mean, this declaration, or for that matter, if you look into Kathopanishad itself, where it says, Etadvaitat, I'll refer to it a little later, with certain degree of certitude, it says, this is it. There's no doubt about it. Or again, when you look into various statements which come again and again, where it says, when this is known, or for example, bhidyate hriday grantihi chidyante sarva samshayaha, that when you tasmin drishte paravare, when you experience the highest, bhidyate hriday grantihi, the knots of the heart are broken, chidyante sarva samshayaha, all the doubts of the mind are also cleared. And this kind of profound statements is what you see again and again in the Upanishads. So this is the general approach of the Upanishad. With this background, I would like to move on to one specific Upanishad as an example, that is Kathopanishad. Why Kathopanishad, you may ask me, but for the simple reason that I love it. And of course, it's more holistic in nature, because it comprises all these aspects that I just mentioned. It has a fascinating story, it has beautiful dialogues, it has charming poetry, it has beautiful and stunning imageries. Please remind me even if I miss it out. And there is a beautiful mysticism in it, and profound psychological insights, I would say, and bold declarations. So since it contains all these aspects in a very holistic manner, I would like to spend a little more time with the Kathopanishad, but wherever possible or wherever needed, let me also draw it from other Upanishads too. So then, what is the fascinating story? Most of you might be knowing it. This is a story where you come across this young boy called Nachiketa, and the Upanishad says, Tamma Kumaragum Santam. Probably he was a Kumara, and Kumara of a very young age. In fact, going by Shankara's interpretation of it, he says, hardly the boy was about 8 to 10 years old. He had not even attained his puberty, perhaps at that time. And though, if you just look into the text in a very literal manner, you might think that that the story belonged to some ancient times. But if you just allow the story to sink in you, you can clearly see the story could have belonged to any time, even now. So there is the son and the father. The father is someone who is a very well-known personality in the society, someone like a strong pillar of the society, and he has organized a big event. And that time it was a yajna, or a ritual, fire ritual, and today it could be any event for that matter, big event, where he knows by the end of the event he's going to draw a lot of name and fame out of it. So he has organized, he has invited people, he is about to give away the written gifts to people who have come there. And as was the norm during those days, cows were considered to be wealth, and he distributes wealth. And this young boy, Nachiketa, 8-year-old boy, is watching them, and something starts bothering him. The boy thinks, what the hell is my father doing? He's supposed to give away gifts. And what kind of gifts are he giving? The gifts are cows here, and he is giving away cows. See that description there. Pitodaka, Jagdhatrana. Pitodaka, the ones who have drunk their water. Jagdhatrana, those that have eaten their grasses. That means they are no more interested in eating. They are no more interested in being Nirindrayaha. They can't even procreate. They can't produce calves. So what is the use of giving away such cows? People who take them, they only curse them. They can't. I mean, apart from cursing, what can you do when you give a cow like that to anyone? So the boy feels very bad. He wants to approach his father, encounter his father, and ask him this. And like, we don't know why Nachiketa's father does this, but it's possible that anyone, any big personality in the society can become complacent, because your additional benefits, or additionally what you're looking at as benefits, or the peripheral benefits seem to be more important than the core action that you're involved in. So more than the ritual and the gifts, he was more interested in the name and fame he was to get, he might have got out of it. So he compromises at that point, and Nachiketa approaches him and asks him, he's so annoyed that he asks him, okay, now you're giving away gifts like this, to whom will you give me away? The father does not respond for a couple of times. And when the boy insists, again, this is what I like to want you to know, see the relentless pursuit of truth. I mean, that bold spirit you can find in Nachiketa, and the spirit of Nachiketa is reflected across the Upanishads. So he asks his father, to whom will you give me away? And when the father is annoyed and irritated, he says, even without thinking, he says, go to death. If it was this day, they would have said, go to hell. That day it was, he said, I'll give you to Yama, the Lord of Death. And the boy reflects, and he starts thinking, worrying, that my father has uttered these words, and I cannot make these words go waste. So this is the dramatic part of the story, but also look into the other part, the other dimension of the story. What is happening here? Nachiketa is about to face death. Yama is the Lord of Death. And if you take them in symbolic manner, what does death mean to all of us? It's the borderline of life, what we call as life, and which can be seen in the black and white spirit. Generally speaking, that death is that border, and the chance encounter with death, again, death can also be interpreted as an intense pain, an intense event of life. So when you have an intense pain or an intense situation of life, or for that matter, death itself, it is those moments that we really reflect upon the meaning of life. Life wouldn't have been so meaningful had there been no death at the end of it. I mean, every moment for someone who has his vision clearly set on death cannot waste any moment of his life. In fact, that's the reason why not just societies, but the countries, the wisdom traditions which have reflected on death seem to be very wise in their approach. And many modern civilizations, many younger civilizations who are still in their infantile position, for whom death is still some sort of a mystery to be avoided, their wisdom of life is really something that needs a lot more maturity. So you can, see all these things in the aspect of Nachiketa encountering death. And as again the dramatic story unfolds, when Nachiketa reaches Yama's house, there's no Yama, because he's busy collecting the souls all over the world, and he's not used to people come to his door, whereas he goes to the doors of the people. So this young boy has to wait there for a few days, and then when he comes back after 3 days, Yama feels sorry that this young boy has been waiting at his doorstep, and he grants him 3 wishes. And the first wish, again, Nachiketa being intelligent boy, again, this is what I find the charming aspect of the Upanishads. So beautifully it's presented. Nachiketa, in fact, asks 3 bonus boons in one boon. He says, I should go back to my father, who is pleased and happy, and who has received all his blessings. So he wants to go back. 1, he wants his father to be happy, and 3rd, he wants his father to have overcome whatever he had made mistakes in performance of the yajna. So 3 boons in one, that's a bonus boon that he asked, and Yama is pleased and he offers it to them. And then the second one comes, it's about a special ritualistic fire. I don't want to spend time on it. And the third one is where our heart lies. He asks, there is some people say there is something that proceeds after death, and some say nothing. You being the minister of death, or of this particular ministry you hold, so please let me know what happens, what survives death, if at all anything survives death. This is the end of the first chapter, and you should see there the way Yama dissuades him from pursuing this line of thought. He says, no, please, Baba, this is not clear. No one knows about it. There are a lot of doubts. People have no knowledge about it. Even gods don't know what it means, what it involves, what it implies. What survives death, no one knows about it. So why do you want to go with all this? Just ask for something else. The boy says, no, nothing doing. And Yama again tries to offer him something else. He says, I can give you anything. I mean, you should really see the offer that Yama gives. I don't know if any boy of his age, any youth, even of our times, can reject the offer that Yama makes. He says, I can give you best of the vehicles. If someone asks you, offers you a Lamborghini or a BMW, I don't know which soul will say no. But he says, I don't want, I mean, Yama says, I'll give you best of the cars, best of the vehicles, chariots, of course, of those times, and which has best music systems. And you will also have company of beautiful damsels who can accompany you in your chariot. But you should see that part where Nachiketa responds. He says, Tavaiva vahas tavanritya gite, Tavaiva vahaha, the chariot that you offer to me, please keep it to yourself. I don't want. And he says, of course, what are you telling me? You're telling me to indulge in my senses? And he says, Sarvendriyanam jarayanti tejaha. And to what extent do I indulge? I can continue with this indulgence, but the more I indulge, it drains my energy out. What do I do with such life where my energy has been sucked up? He says, and you're also promising me a long life. How long will you give? You will give me till maybe next few hundreds of years, but even that life has an end. It could, I'm just postponing my death, but what use of a life which still I have to see that death in that manner. So he says, I don't want this. And see the statement he makes at the end. He says, if you honor your promise, if you have any respect in you, please grant me this wish or nothing else. This is such a bold statement. That's why he says, this is the relentless pursuit of truth that you can see, the spirit of Nachiketa that you can see in the Kathopanishad. I don't think any other Upanishad has brought it out so dramatically, but this is reflected across the Upanishads, not just the Upanishad, in the entire Vedic literature. You can see how bold the rishis have been. And this is exactly what, when you, if you can recollect with the statement of Max Muller, where he said, they were so bold in their approach, no compromise anywhere. And Nachiketa stands as a towering personality to prove this point. And going further, the other idea, fundamental teaching of Upanishad, is divinity of each being. There is not a single soul, there is not a single being that is not an expression of divinity. And in order to understand this, the very first Upanishad that we listed, Ishavasya Upanishad, you can see the very first verse which says, Ishavasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyan jagat. Yat kincha, I mean, the usage of yat kinchit in Sanskrit means, I mean, anything tuchha, anything that is infinitesimally small, even that, Ishavasyamidam, this has been enveloped by in Isha. And this is the divinity that envelops, which is present, immanent, and which also covers from outside. And therefore, there is nothing apart from this divinity, whether human being, animal, plant life, or for that matter, an insentient thing like a stone. Everything has been enveloped by Isha. And this is the declaration again of the Upanishad. This gets repeated often, again and again, everywhere. Continuing this idea, the spiritual unity and solidarity of existence. No other text, I will very clearly say, no other text point to this truth again and again. And how does it do? It does it by reconciliation of apparent contradictions also. I mean, this is where the genius of the Upanishadic mind comes into picture, where it reconciles all those so-called, like the difference we have between sentient being and insentient being, the difference that has between things that move and things that don't move. Like all these apparent contradictions are also united in its transcendental form, and that is the finest offering of the Upanishads. And I sometimes, on a lighter side, I say, especially to my foreign friends who are puzzled many times to look at the Indian nod, I mean, when they ask a question, we generally do it like this. So this doesn't speak to them. Either it has to be like this for yes, or a very clear-cut no. So yes is understandable, no is understandable. What is this is the question. And I say this is an expression of the Upanishadic thought, where the seemingly opposite things can be reconciled into one gracious form. I mean, so in this way, like in the Indian thought, just take that for that matter. Various religions are possible here. Traditions which have different approaches of thought are possible. I mean, any new religion is a possibility in the Indian soil. Why? Because it has been fertiled by the Upanishadic thought. Everything can be held together. Everything has a related existence. Only it is absolute only about the absolute, but everything else, everything for that matter, to the extent, maybe to draw from the Mundakopanishad, where it begins with the classification of the knowledge systems, the very, again, a bold statement it makes is that we have two kinds of knowledge, Paravidya and Aparavidya. And everyone will expect Paravidya to be okay with Veda, the religious texts, or the Upanishads, or Bhagavad Gita to be the Paravidya, the highest knowledge. But Mundaka Upanishad throws it away in one line. It says, all Rigveda, Yajurveda, everything that you consider sacred, all that is Aparavidya, inferior knowledge. I mean, can you imagine a text rejecting its own authority? It says, even this Upanishad is Aparavidya. Then what is Paravidya? It says, Para yaya tadaksharam adhigamyate. That is para knowledge by which the imperishable, the infinite is known, right? And this is the beauty of the Upanishad. So the ability to hold everything. So it's absolute, only about the absolute. Everything is related. Everything has a next level of existence. So that is the spiritual unity and solidarity of all existence. And going further, just give me a moment. I'm running out of battery. Yeah. Sorry for this. So then you have this idea, again, I want you to note this. This is a very important idea that we come across. Again, this fall back to Kathopanishad. So the first section of the first unit of Kathopanishad ends with questions of Nachiketa. And finally, having tested Nachiketa, Yama is convinced, here is a boy who is the initiated. Remember, Upanishad, the knowledge that is transferred to a student who is close to the teacher, who is the initiated, the one who is willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of the knowledge. Okay, now he's convinced that Nachiketa is that young boy, and now he starts his response to that question. He doesn't jump into the answer. He starts it with a very interesting concept. Many of us might wonder why Nachiketa, when Yama brings in this idea, he starts with the idea of Shreyas and Preyas. He says, we have two doors in front of us, two choices that we have in front of us. One is the road of Shreyas, the other is the path of Preyas. We need to make a choice. I want you to note this, the very idea that says at every given moment of our life, there is a possibility of making a choice between Shreyas and Preyas. Preyas is what? Something that is pleasing to me at that moment, an easy go. What is Shreyas? The best of the moment. There could be 10 options that one can take, but of the 10, there could be one which is the best. It may not be very comfortable to me. It may not be very pleasing to me at the moment. Of course, we are fortunate if we both concur to one. If the Shreyas and Preyas falls in one, then it is good enough. But if it doesn't, then we have the choices in front of us, the shreyas and the prayas. But what I want you to notice, the very idea to acknowledge, yes, we have a choice. When someone triggers me, triggers anger in me, if that moment I can look into it as, there is a shreyas approach, there is a prayas approach, I have a choice that I need to make. And the Upanishad continues and says, whether you take the path of prayas, whether you take the path of shreyas, there is an implication, there is a consequence. So that is bound. There is a particular consequence for shreyas, there is a particular consequence for prayas. Both have their consequences, yet you have a choice to make. And this is something very, very significant that we really need to recognize, especially if we have made a commitment to a conscious living, then we need to realize that we have a choice. And what follows, the moment when we recognize the presence of a choice, we might feel, or this is again a wrong notion that many of us might have, those who are in the spiritual journey, they might consider once we get into this life, everything is peaceful. Therefore, there are many teachers also who want to be always wearing a smile. You know, I mean, I'm a yoga teacher, therefore I need to be smiling always, irrespective of what state of mind I am in. So the smile has always to be there. But I mean, I want you to understand, just because I'm on the spiritual path, my conflicts are no less. In fact, the conflicts have multiplied in numbers, because what was not a possibility earlier is now a possibility. If there was a fixed program earlier, there's no need, there's no conflict at all. If someone hits me, I hit him back. Where is the scope for a conflict? It is very clear. It's done, deal. But when the moment you realize the other person is triggering something in me, and I can make a choice whether to react or not to react, and my tendency says I need to react in a particular manner. Fine. So when my tendency is saying that I need to react in a particular manner, but my cognitive ability, cognitive understanding shows me there are better ways of responding to this event, it is then when conflict happens. Therefore, for the initial path, the moment when we get into spiritual path, don't think we have lesser number of conflicts. In fact, we have more number of conflicts. It actually peaks at some point of time, and only later it starts to subdue. Okay. So then when it starts to subdue, you can also realize how free you are in making this choice. And every time you make a choice, you either reinforce that freedom or you curtail that freedom. So this idea that we have a choice and there is a possibility of a conflict that comes, and it actually can reinforce freedom, is an idea that you can find again in the teaching of the Upanishads, in Kathopanishad, in the very beginning of the second section of the first unit. And all these thoughts, I will say, are at once liberating and empowering. I mean, just imagine how empowering this thought, liberating this thought could be when you recognize you have a choice, and how empowering when it means that, again, let me say this. So at the end of the Kathopanishad, it ends with this statement. It says, Nachiketa understood this and he became free. The story does not end there. It adds another line. Anyone who understands this will be free like Nachiketa. This is the most beautiful part. Like the kind of reassurance it gives, the way it empowers everyone who is walking on this field. Like if you're in this path, it might take a while, but still you will be able to reach that destination. The same idea you can find in the Bhagavad Gita. But as I said, all the other later texts, traditions, practices, they reflect what has been taught in the Upanishads. No doubt Upanishads reflect what has been said in the earlier Vedic literature, but though it reflects, it brings about a completely fresh perspective than the Vedas too. Okay. And then the call for courage of thought and action. This is one, again, another recurring theme that you can come across. You can see it in Kathopanishad also, brought about in words, in complete unambiguous terms, especially when it speaks about the dhira. This term comes often in the Upanishads. Dhira. You might wonder, dhira, literal translation, means a courageous person. What has a spiritual text to do with a courageous person? But he says, it's here the courage of this person is involved. Especially in a verse like Paranchikhani Vitran Swayambhuhu Tasmat Parang Pashyati Nantaratman Kashchid Dhira Pratyek Atmanamaikshat. It says Kashchid Dhiraha. The verse says that naturally all the senses are turned outside. The nature of the senses is to go to the world where they are looking at. Ear looking outside, ear hearing outside, eyes looking outside, the skin feeling the outer world. So every sense is looking outward. And if I say my mind is drifting outward, it doesn't need courage to do that. When do you need courage? When you need to flow against the current, right? You need courage in your thought, in your action. And kashchid dhiraha pratyek atmanamikshat. So one courageous man who was desirous of looking inside, looking within, he was able to turn it in. So this idea of a dhira, a courageous person is again and again mentioned, again connected back to the previous idea that we were discussing. When you have a choice, and the choice can give you conflict, and in that conflict, again, you need to make a decision, and that decision is supported by freedom and courage. It has to be there. If the courage is not there, I may not be willing to walk the path that I intend to do. So this call for courage and courage of thought and action. And then moving further, it also brings about radical shift of perspective. What do I mean by it? Our modern understanding of consciousness is something like this. When the material existence has come into relationship in a particular manner, when the body, when the juices, when the physical, biological, chemical actions happen or they interact in a particular manner, it's then consciousness emerges. So consciousness is an emergent phenomenon which comes out of the material world. But look at the Upanishads. It says, what is the primary thing? That is consciousness. Consciousness exists primarily, and everything emerges also out of that consciousness. Matter is an emergent phenomenon of the consciousness. Therefore, matter can relapse back into consciousness. So consciousness is the fundamental unity, fundamental aspect of existence, and everything else is a manifestation or expression of that singular consciousness. See the way it radically shifts our perspective of the world. Or also the other sentence that I quoted earlier, Shrunvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putraha. While we have understanding of human being as sinners, we have understanding of human beings as someone who needs to carry guilt forever and forever because someone else was punished for our sins. When you have these ideas like this, see how liberating the idea here it is. It says, you are the sons of immortality. You are that same divine sparkle. And continuing this idea further, Swami Ranganathananda in one of his writings, he says, scratch any young man and you can see the same Rishi blood flowing in him. So that, like, you are that sons of immortality, and not just that, you are the same person as those Rishis who were able to experience this highest reality. No doubt we might have forgotten, no doubt there might have been errors in our behavior and our being, but in essentiality, we are the same. We are the divine sparkling. There is no difference between me and that highest. I mean, there cannot be any more empowering thought than this. No aspect of life has been left out of its ambit. So this is the radical shift, the promise that the Upanishads offer. And going further, the certitude and assurance. What do I mean by certitude? The way the Upanishad make the statement. For example, in Kathopanishad itself, you see the question of Nachiketa when he asks, what exists? Does something survive or not? So that is the question. And Yama, you need to see him. He answers in the first chapter itself. But when he goes to the second chapter, that's the first section of the second chapter, the whole series of verses, you can see ending with the statement, Etadvaitad. This is that. I mean, again, I want you to note the importance of usage of terms in Sanskrit. Why is a one-letter word that we use in Sanskrit, which actually highlights something as an essential truth. This is it. That emphasis that we can make in a statement, no, this is it. Like this kind of certitude is what you see in a statement like that, where it says, you ask me this question, take down, this is the answer for your question. This is the answer for your question. This is what survives death. So in this manner, Yama answers. You can find it in Kathopanishad, but you can find it in other places also. We look into Taittiriya Upanishad, where it says about the nature of happiness. The whole section of Ananda Mimamsa starts with the statement like Yuva Syat Sadhu Yuva Adhyayakaha Ashishtaha Dridishtaha Balishtaha, where it says, I mean, again, see the beautiful definition of happiness, or one unit of human happiness, how Upanishad also define these concepts. Consider this a young man who is very handsome, who is well learned, Ashishtaha, who has high aspirations in life or noble aspirations in life, Dridishtaha, one who is strong enough or one who is motivated, and Balishtaha, physically and otherwise also he is very strong. Tasyayam Prithvi Sarva Vittasya Purnasat, and he Purnasyat, and he has all the wealth of the world. If there is a person, there is a young boy like this, the happiness that he might be enjoying. Again, it also says that he has good interests in life. Okay, this is something very important to note. So one who has good interests in life has all the wealth that he needs, and he's handsome, he's strong, he has an athletic body, he has a sharp mind, he has all these things, and the happiness that he enjoys, imagine that to be 1 unit of happiness that we experience. 1 unit, and then it goes on multiplying. Okay, the 100-fold of it, the 100-fold of it, the 100-fold of it, and finally it clicks after maybe a few thousands folds after multiplying it. It says the Brahmananda, what one is able to experience at one's highest state is that Brahmananda that has no comparison to what we identify or what we note as happiness in our ordinary lives. It might be a gateway to that highest, but you can understand the proportion of difference that exists there. And when it says, this is that Brahmananda one can experience. Again, with such degree of certitude, Upanishads go on making this statement, and you can see it everywhere. And again, I have said earlier itself about bold declarations. It makes very bold statements, which we looked into, like Amritasya Putraha, or this is it, or you are Brahman, the Tattvamasi statement of that Shwetaketu was told, or any such statement like that. And then finally, the emphasis, one should not led into any disbelief, I mean, any kind of belief that Upanishads speak of otherworldly nature. They speak more about what happens after you die. That's ultimate, I mean, that's absolute rubbish. I would like to say what the emphasis upon is here and now. In the Kathopanishad itself, it says that iha chet, like here you have to realize. If you don't realize it here, it doesn't. So therefore, often you see the word iha that is being used. Here is where you need to understand. Now connected to Yoga Sutras, what is the first sutra? Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Atha, what does Yatha mean there? It is the right moment for one to begin the yoga practice. It's here and now. If not here, where? If not now, when? The question that Yoga Sutra asks, the very first sutra, that idea again comes from the Upanishad. Here you need to know, not elsewhere or a later period. If this is the moment that you have declared, understood, here, please look into it. So with this, I try to summarize some of the teachings of the Upanishads. I mean, there are many things one can add about it, but in the interest of time, I will quickly move on to the next segment. So I had asked you about what are all the foundational principles of yoga that we are familiar with, and you had listed many interesting, important things. So we'll just look into some of them. I know all that I have listed here is what you have already said. Again, this is the interesting aspect of the yoga tradition, because you speak from your experience, and the text or the teaching of the Upanishad becomes important, as I said earlier, because it connects with your experience. And this is the first idea, I would say, as the experiential basis of all knowledge. The whole of Yoga Sutra, if you can look at it, if you want to understand it, the bulk of Yoga Sutra is about practice, 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 practice. Whether it is the very second chapter, which begins with Kriya Yoga, then Ashtanga Yoga, or the first chapter which says about Abhyasa and Vairagya and Ekatattva Abhyasa. See the practice, practice, practice. It's a predominantly practice-oriented tradition. The philosophy comes only in the last bit of it, probably perhaps a little in the fourth chapter and elsewhere here and there. Apart from it, it's a practical tradition. And where is this emphasis on the practical tradition comes from? Again, I would point towards the Upanishads. Through and through, it emphasizes on the experiential nature of the knowledge. If it does not culminate in your experience, it says no need. And I would also like to add experimental basis. Why would I say that? Again, I want you to connect to the story of the Shweta Ketu. It's again, it has a very interesting beginning, I should say, but I really don't have time for it. When Shweta Ketu returns from his Gurukulam and his father asks him, Aruni asks him, have you learnt one thing that by knowing which everything else is known? This is a common question across the Upanishad once again. And Shweta Ketu, you should look at his answer. You will really, again, that's why I say that it can be of any period and any place. It has that universal nature. And Shweta Ketu, the way he was, a young boy, who had his own understanding of things, without any hesitation, he says, he doesn't say, I don't know, like youth of our times, he says, perhaps my teacher did not know it, therefore he has not taught me. This is exactly what he says. Had he known it, he would have taught me. Since he has not taught me, perhaps even he doesn't know. So that's how the whole story of Shweta Ketu and Aruni begins, the conversation begins. And throughout, in the later part of the story, you can see Aruni asking Shweta Ketu, he says, now go and get me a seed. So he goes and bring the store of seed of banyan tree, and he says, ask him to open it. So he opens it and shows it and says, okay, now look into it, look into it. In a similar way, he asks him to fetch some water and salt, and he says, add salt to the water, and he wants him to experiment. So the experiential and experimental basis of the yoga knowledge that we are all familiar with comes from the unambiguous presentation of the Upanishads. At every moment, it emphasizes, please connect with your experience. If it doesn't, don't proceed on this line. So that is the fundamental thing. And then I would like to say or add the definition and meaning of yoga. Fine. What is the definition of yoga that we are familiar with? Most of us use the term unity, which many of you listed also in the beginning, uniting the individual self with the highest self, uniting the body, mind, and prana. So these are some of the common definitions of the word yoga that we come across, or the meaning of yoga. But if you really look into the yoga text and Yoga Sutra text and the commentary of Vyasa on the Yoga Sutras, he very clearly says, see, the word yoga can be derived from two roots, one yujir yoge and yuj samadhav. In the yoga that we will be speaking about in the Raja Yoga tradition, he doesn't use the term Raja Yoga, but in this tradition, we mean yuj samadhav, dissolution, not unity. He very clearly says, na unity, na yoge. We don't want to take that meaning that does not do full justice to what we want to say. We would rather prefer the second meaning, that is yuj samadhav. But still, when we look into the term yoga, the idea of unity makes so much sense to us. Where does it come from? It comes from the Upanishad. Again, this is from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. The second part I already quoted it, that is Shrunvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putraha. The first part is Yujevam Brahma Purvyam Namobhihi. That's even see the word that is used, Yujevam, I will unite. Yuje is the first person statement. Yujevam, you both. What is you both? We will look into it later if time permits, or you can generally accept it as mind, body, or the body and the prana, or the mind and the prana in the Brahma. And walk, it says, continuing further, Purvasya Suribhihi. So, Patyeva Surehe, walking along the path of the wise who have gone in this tradition, I would like to unite my breath and mind in the highest, that is Brahman. This whole idea of uniting comes from the Upanishad. Nowhere you can see such definition in a very clear-cut terms, using the verb form of it, yuj, I unite, comes from the Upanishad. And also the first definition of the yoga, the term yoga itself appears in the Kathopanishad. In the last section of the Kathopanishad, where you have the whole statements like Yada Panchavatishtante Jnanani Manasasaha, when all the five senses along with the mind, when they come to a certain nature of steadiness, that is the highest state. And that highest state, tam yogamiti manyante sthiram indriya dharanam, that is known as yoga, which is of holding the senses firmly. The definition of yoga, the very understanding of yoga and the definition of yoga comes from the Upanishad. In fact, Kathopanishad, the end again, it ends with the statement. It says, Nachiketa understood this Brahma Vidya and also Yoga Vidya. It uses both the terms. So that whole idea of yoga being very firmly established. In the Vedic literature, you don't find the term yoga so much. Though it might be there, it's used in a slightly different sense. What you see there as a concept, as a central concept, is the term yajna, sacrifice, which Acharya Ramchandra Bhattji brought it about in a beautiful manner in one of our early sessions here. So you find the concept of yajna there, but moving on, the shift from yajna to yoga is seen, and that fundamental shift was brought about by the Upanishadic tradition, where it places that importance in yoga. Going further, Bhagavad Gita takes it up. That's why each chapter of the Gita is called the yoga there. To the extent, the very first chapter where you can see Arjuna sitting down in despondency, sitting down in depression, is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's depression, right? So every chapter, the second one is Sankhya Yoga, the third one is Karma Yoga. So in this way, each chapter is termed as yoga. And that shift was fundamentally brought about by the Upanishadic literature. And I was surprised, many of you might also be surprised, because we have the understanding that yoga emerges out of the Sankhyan framework, right? Where you have the Purusha on one side and the Prakriti and all the evolutes of the Prakriti. So this whole system is the basis for the work of the yoga. As you can see, the fourth chapter says Kaivalya Pada. What does the Kaivalya Pada, Kaivalya mean? It is the liberating of the Purusha from the hold of Prakriti, right? So you have this notion that has been provided, a beautiful logical framework that has been provided by the Sankhya. But does it have its seeds in the Upanishadic literature? Yes, we do have seeds in the Upanishadic literature. Again, I'll fall back on the Kathopanishad, where you have this two verses. It is repeated twice in the Kathopanishad, I should say. Indriyebhyah parahyarthaha artebhyascha param manaha manasastu para buddhihi buddher atma mahan paraha. You can see the order. It's slightly cryptic here, but again, leaving that aspect, it says you have artha, that is sense objects, then you have indriya, sense organs, then you have the manas, which is even more subtle than the indriyas, then you have buddhi, which is even more subtle than the manas, and then you have buddher atma mahan para, buddhe param avyaktam, beyond the buddhi, that is the mahat. Beyond the mahat is avyakta or prakriti, and beyond prakriti is the purusha. And when you reach purusha, sa kashtha, sa paragatihi, that is the highest. There is nothing beyond it. So that's the Sankhyan framework that we are all familiar with, also has its inputs from the Upanishadic literature. And this is an important concept, not so much known, but it has been mentioned in Kathopanishad itself in two places. And moving further, the shift that you can see, or the focus that you can see on the knower. See, this is something, a very important leap that took place thousands of years ago. The quest to know was there across all cultures and civilizations. Whether Eastern or Western, no civilization can claim to have monopoly over the quest for knowledge. All civilizations held it. But to the extent that here in this tradition, you can see the shift not only, the quest was not only directed towards the external world, but at some point, the people started to question. These scientists started to ask the question, fine, I'm knowing it, but what actually is the process of knowledge? How do I know? Who is the knower, and what are the instruments of knowing? This is a big shift in the whole world of knowledge. what we call today as epistemology, you should really appreciate how important this question has been. We have one Upanishad which completely dedicates itself to this thought. No doubt it has come in other places also, but Keno Upanishad for that matter, it starts with the question, Kenetam Preshitam Patati Manaha. So, sent by whom does my mind fall upon the object? How does my ear listen? How does my eye see? How does this all work? Who is actually seeing? Who is actually listening? Who is actually feeling? Like this question, who is knowing all these things, is the exploration of one whole Upanishad, Keno Upanishad. I mean, it's so important because it highlights the fact that we understand the world through our senses. And whatever our senses allow, that is the framework or range in which we know things. This is very important because my idea of reality is always questionable because my idea is based on the inputs that I have received. If my inputs change a little bit, if the range changes, my experience is altered completely. Let me give you a quick example and move on. What is the range of my auditory level? It's perhaps from 20 decibels to 120 decibels. So I can only hear those sounds, and I feel only those sounds exist which I can hear. Imagine there is a sound which is below 20 decibels or beyond 120 decibels, and that sound happens, I am not able to hear. And for me, that sound does not exist. And normally, convinced by the idea that this is what reality is all about, I will very reluctantly say that only these sounds exist, no other sounds exist. But if we have a seismograph which can record sounds or vibrations of a different frequency, that will show, no, there was some other vibration that took place, right? So if you just alter the range, my experience of the object changes, the material, the objective world changes. Just if my senses, my eye for that matter, looks within the range of Vibgyor, as some people would pronounce it. So, but if there is a range beyond violet and, I mean, below violet and beyond red, if I'm able to see it, my understanding of the reality changes. If my body, I mean, if my eyes have the X-ray tendency, I really wonder what beauty is all about then. Like the moment, if you can see, as Yoga Sutra at some point, at some stage point towards, if you can see, if you can look beyond the skin, if you can look at the flesh, if you can look at the phlegm, if you can look at all the impurities that are present in the body, will you still be attracted towards the body? This is the question that Yoga Sutra asks at some point of time, right? Okay, so if my eyes can look into it, can I still have the understanding of beauty? Can I still have the understanding of reality in the way I hold on to it? No, it gets completely altered, right? What my instruments are determines my perception. How good are my instruments is the question that Keno Upanishad explains in a detailed manner. And having done that, it then shifts the focus, like all the other Upanishads does. It brings the light on the knower, the seer. The very third sutra, which says, Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. When all the modifications of the mind are stopped down, slowed down, then what exists there is the drashta, the seer. This idea again comes from the Upanishad. And I won't want to explain, I mean, take up the next points further so much. That is the nature of consciousness. You're all familiar with that there exists one singular consciousness. In fact, many modern scientists, physicists have concurred with this idea. Schrodinger says, the idea of consciousness is singular in nature, which has no plural to it. I mean, there are many such statements like that. I don't want to go in. So the nature of consciousness is one idea that is again the predominant idea that is mentioned in all the Upanishads. And the same thing is carried out in the Bhagavad Gita and other later texts also. And again, I was referring to the Anandavalli, Brahmanandavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad, where it finally says, happiness, or rather bliss, is the true nature of the self. And for the sake of this happiness, we engage in every activity. Everything that we do, everything for that we live is for the sake of this happiness, because happiness is my home, happiness is home, happiness is my home, and that's where I need to enter into. So this idea comes from there. Again, the idea of multi-layered existence of human personality, the Panchakosha model, which is the basis of many therapeutic approaches in the modern, in the current situation that we use, the integrated approach to yoga therapy, which is one of the highly successful models given to us by S. Vyasa, for which we have to be eternally grateful. This is again based on the idea of Panchakosha that we use so often in the yoga world. Again, where does it come from? This comes from Taittiriya Upanishad. Again, it starts with a beautiful story of Bhrigu, who is also the student of Varuna, and he goes to his father, who is very curious to know what reality is all about. And every time Bhrigu is pushed to think beyond, okay, fine, you have arrived at the physical material existence, think beyond. He comes to the prana existence. Varuna asks him to think beyond. In this way, Varuna pushes him. And finally, when Bhrigu reaches the ultimate understanding, he doesn't even return to his father, because he knows, because that is the experiential knowledge. You don't have any doubt anymore. Connect to what Mundaka Upanishad says. Chidyante sarva samshayaha. All doubts are clarified. No doubts exist. Okay, then the whole idea of the importance of prana and its connection and its functioning. Fine, this is what we use so much in the yoga world. The whole of the pranayama is so critical to the yoga practice, right? That's where you link it with the body and also with the mind. Where does it again come from? Prashnopanishad takes up this question. What is prana? How does it work? What are the channels in which pranas operate? So those are taken up by the 6 questions that are presented in the Prashnopanishad. Again, a beautiful Upanishad which goes to the extent of saying prana is like a mother. And if mother is pleased, as mother is always pleased, she's always willing to give so much. And that is the nature of prana. It's just that I need to recognize her. Mateva putran rakshasva. Please protect us. Please nourish us like a mother. This is the prayer that Prashnopanishad offers us to prana. And going elsewhere also, in fact, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, you can see prana is there are beautiful imageries that are used. I will refer to a couple of them. One imagery that Brihadaranyaka Upanishad uses is the kite and the thread. I mean, the kite is flying high, but what actually controls the kite? It is the wind outside, but more than that, it is the thread that is connected to the kite, right? So it says in a similar manner, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, prana is that sutra, that thread, and kite is the mind. If you really have to deal with the mind, don't think about dealing with the mind directly. This is a mistake many of us do, right? We say we are trying to sit into meditation, we are not able to control it, because it's like kite. I mean, you can't operate on it directly. The wind takes away in all directions. So what is that skill that you can use? Recognize the presence of a thread there, and that is prana. So this imagery comes in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Prana and its kinship with the mind. And I also already referred to the earlier point, a thorough examination of all spheres of our existence. Okay, this is again an important point. If you look into Mandukya Upanishad, which is one of the shortest Upanishads, of course, if you need to leave out the Mandukya Karikas. If you leave out the Karikas, Mandukya Upanishad contains only 12 verses, and each verse, hundreds of verses of commentaries can be written on it. That's why Karika becomes so huge a text. Okay. Again, this is such a profound idea that we use in the yoga world. The whole idea of Yoga Nidra or Nidra Yoga, both we experienced in this month-long festival. We had a session on Nidra Yoga by Andreri and Yoga Nidra by Aarti Padmanabhanji. Both were looking into these aspects. We operate in the world in 4 levels. That is Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. Normally, we are familiar with the first 2, Jagrat and Swapna. This Upanishad explores each dimension of our existence, of our sphere of our experience, sphere of our activity. And it says, there is a waking state. This is how we express ourselves here. There is a sleep state. This is how we experience. It does not negate even the sleep experience. Sleep experience is also real. I mean, I'm pointing it because many people say that Vedanta negates the worldly existence. No, that's absolute false. In fact, Vedanta accepts that also. It says pratibhasika satta. It has a related lower level of existence. When I'm experiencing it is completely true. If I see a snake in my dream, I start palpitating. I have all sorts of experiences which I would have had in the awakened state. The same thing happens in the dream state also, right? So that is, it is real, but that is called into question when I wake up to the next level in the awakened state. And similarly, there is also a dream state where I really don't see anything, I don't hear anything, but I'm also not aware of it. It's only when I wake up, then my mind realizes, Sukham aham aswapsam, I slept well. So if I am able to recognize when I wake up, I have slept well, then it means perhaps something in me was registering it while the experience was happening. It was just that I lacked the active connection with it at that moment, right? So that is the Sushuptavastha. And then it goes to the fourth state. It doesn't even want to name it. It says Turiya, the fourth state. And what is that fourth state? It says, imagine a situation where you're in a Sushupti, but you're completely aware of it as it is happening. Such beautiful promise. That is the Turyavastha. And even the description of Turyavastha, na prajnam, na prajnam, na bahishprajnam, na antahprajnam. Like it's a beautiful verse that is there. And I would highly invite you to look into that verse of the Mandukya Upanishad. And again, in the Mandukya Upanishad, you also have in the description of Om. Again, that brings us to the next point, importance of Om and meditation on it. So Mandukya Upanishad connects the aspects of A, U, Ma there, and Mundaka Upanishad, this Mundaka Upanishad comes up with a beautiful verse and imagery when it says, Pranavo dhanusharo hyatma brahmatalakshya mujyate apramattena vedhavyam sharavattanmayo bhavet. It says, Pranava is the dhanu, the Om is the bow, and Sharo Hyatma, the self, the individual limited self is the arrow. So placing oneself on this bow, what is your target? Brahma is the target. Being mindful, you need to leap towards the target and become one with that Brahman. This is the imagery that you get in the Mundaka Upanishad. The same idea of Om, the importance of Om that you can see in the Yoga Sutra. Tasya vachakah pranavaha, while speaking about the Ishvara, that Om is the expression of Ishvara. The same thing you can find in the Kathopanishad also about the importance of Om. So in this way, much of these ideas that we use in the Upanishadic world, in the yogic world, they all have their sources, the origin in the Upanishads. I mean, I can go on with many of these, but I want to draw your attention to a couple of other things. And with that, I would like to conclude. I was saying about beautiful and stunning imageries. I'll just take a couple of moments to bring it before you. There are many, many beautiful imageries in Kathopanishad itself and across Upanishads. So in Kathopanishad, one I said about the Shreyas and Prayas. Of course, there's no imagery involved there, but going further, it hints towards something which Mundaka Upanishad takes it up in other place. It says, Rutam Pibantau Sukritasya Loke. It speaks about two aspects of the self in the bodily existence. One which is involved, one which is witness. The same idea you can see in a beautiful imagery in the Mundaka Upanishad where it says, Dvasuparna Sayuja Sakhaya. So there are two birds. One bird is eating the fruit that is there in the tree, and the other bird is just sitting on a higher branch and observing everything that is happening. Such a beautiful imagery that we use often, no, when we speak about working with the witness self within us. So there are two selves that we speak about in the yoga world, the involved self and the witness self. And that comes from this imagery of the Mundaka Upanishad, Dvasuparna, two birds presented in a beautiful manner. And see the details in which they present it. Again, this goes to the mind which could so spontaneously connect with nature, spontaneously have that intuition and inspiration and bring all of them together in just one little expression. Okay, and what is that fruit? It's the fruit of karma, the karma phala. So one is eating the fruit of action, the other one is watching it. At the same moment, this is something again very important. Simultaneously, we have two dimensions of existence. The one completely involved, the other one completely liberated. Those who are familiar with the computer technology, you can see two ports that we use there. One is the slave port and one is the master port. To which one am I plugging into? Am I plugging into the slave port? Am I plugging into the master port? If I'm acting with the witness consciousness, I'm in the master port. When I'm acting as the involved consciousness, I'm in the slave port. So this is something that we need to see. Going on further, the other beautiful imagery again Kathopanishad presents to us is the imagery of the chariot. Of course, we are familiar with the chariot, the war scene in the Mahabharata and in the Bhagavad Gita, but again, that is so symbolic in nature, what you see in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, you have the chariot, you have 4 or 5 horses, you have Krishna there, and you have Arjuna, right? So dramatic. But where does it come from actually? From Kathopanishad, where it says, where it starts with beautiful verse of the body as the chariot, senses as the horses, the self as the one sitting behind, and buddhi, the intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, who is the charioteer who is there. So, and you have many verses in the Kathopanishad itself, which goes on explaining what happens when charioteer is in control, what happens when charioteer is not in control. So all that, the actual dramatic scene is seen in the Mahabharata, but the actual idea, the symbolic idea is seen in the Upanishad. So that is another imagery. Going further again, there is this beautiful imagery of the fort, body as a fort with 9 or 11 openings. Different Upanishads put different openings, but we are familiar with 9 openings, the ears, the eyes, the openings of Purisha and Mutra, that is the lower opening. So all these different openings are there. Okay, this is conceived as a fort where the master resides. So what happens when the fort is under control? What happens? The external forces siege the fort. This is a beautiful imagery. Again, that is part of the Kathopanishad. And there's one more important and a beautiful and a perennial imagery that is provided by the Kathopanishad, later taken up by Bhagavad Gita. And even today, you can see in many houses and in many places, the imagery of an inverted tree, the banyan tree, right? Esho Ashwatha Sanatanaha, Urdhvamolo Avakshaka, Esho Ashwatha Sanatanaha. The Sanatana, the ever-existent, perennial, the one without an end, that tree, the banyan tree, which is inverted in nature, with its root to the source, with its branches below. This is the imagery that you find in the Kathopanishad. Again, this imagery, you should actually look into Shankara's commentary there. Wow, you just can't stop wondering at what Shankara has to offer there. Such a fine mind, such a critical mind, and such flowery language, both combined together. The beauty of a poet and the precision of a scientist, both are put together, and you can see that explanation of how there is this interrelation, interconnectedness of the world, and how this inverted banyan tree expresses all these things in a beautiful manner. That imagery belongs to Kathopanishad. You see it the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita also. So in this way, again, I can go on and go on, but just to connect with 2 more things, I have mentioned how these have impacted the Indian mind, Indian thought, the Eastern world in general, but it has not left the Western culture, Western civilization also. It has tried to touch it in its own ways and has done some wonders. I'll just give a couple of instances. Maybe it will be good enough for the moment. One is that this incident happens somewhere around 1929 when Heisenberg comes up with the idea of uncertainty principle. There are many debates on this whole idea, but I would like to present this. So Heisenberg comes up with this idea of uncertainty principle, and that was the age when science was very certain. There was no scope for ambiguity. So when he comes up with this uncertainty principle, where it says either you can know the direction or the momentum, you cannot know the both. You cannot know both the momentum as well as the direction of that smallest particle of the electron. So then he's not so willing to publish it because it lacks that certitude. Fine. So some says he had already published, but some say he was still in doubts. And then he also was traveling, and we have records where he comes to India and meets Rabindranath Tagore, and they have elaborate discussion sessions on the Upanishad, especially Ishavasya Upanishad. And then during those discussions, again, this is noted by Fritjof Capra in his own book, where he says, in those discussions, Heisenberg was convinced of the interrelatedness of the things, the impermanence of things, and the relational nature of existence. So having convinced with these ideas, which also got a support from the Eastern mystical tradition, he goes back and then presents it in a more bolder manner. Some people say, but I mean, at no point I'm not saying, sorry, at no point I'm trying to show that this idea comes from the Upanishad. No, I mean, I don't need any such false claims. They are completely independent thoughts. But what I'm trying to say is that when you go to the deepest aspects of one's existence, or when you go towards the reality in its deepest nature, things become very cryptic, and science also expresses it, mysticism also expresses it. What Heisenberg reached was a scientific exploration through the external world, and what the Upanishadic way back thousands of years before looked into, I mean, had arrived at a similar conclusion by exploring the inner world. This is one, but this is not just the only one. I mean, look into many modern Western writers and thinkers. One example I can see quote is of William Somerset Maugham, who has written a novel which was also produced into a movie 2 times, once in 1946 itself and once in 1984, The Razor's Edge. Even the title that comes from Kathopanishad. In Kathopanishad, you have this beautiful verse which Swami Vivekananda had made his motto: Uttisthata Jagrata Prapya Varan Nibodhata Kshurasya Dhara Nishita Duratyaya Durgam Pathastat Kavayo Vadanti. Kshurasya Dhara, the razor's edge. Kshura means a blade or a razor. Dhara is the edge of it. This path, connected back to the idea of the Dhira, the courageous person, the path that he has to take is a very difficult path. Durgam pathaha tat kavayo vadanti. Kavayaha, wise men say this is a very difficult path, and likens it to the edge of a razor. You have to walk on this, and it is possible. Uttishtata, so please wake up. Get up, Jagrata, wake up, Prapya Varan Nibodhata. Reach the masters, reach knowledgeable men, take refuge in wise men, and then follow. You will be able to attain this despite the difficulty. There is a huge reward, a promise at the end. This is the verse from Kathopanishad that was taken up as a story, a beautiful novel which has the leading character called Larry, who is disillusioned after the war experience. He travels across the world and he comes to India. He meets a character called Ganesh, which many people say is the Sri Ramana Maharshi, and then has his own insights, and that comes out as the movie, a beautiful, it was adapted to movie twice, and that is William Somerset Maugham. Or look into the writings of Eliot, for that matter. He ends The Wasteland with the quotation from the Upanishads. Or look into the writings of Yeats. I mean, all these great thinkers, writers, poets were so fascinated. Scientists, Schrodinger, many, I mean, one can go on listing them, all were fascinated by what Upanishads had to offer them. So that's why I'd like to say Upanishads have influenced Indian thought, the Eastern thought, the Western thought, I mean, the thought of the world in very significant ways. And if, again, I'm just come back to the last point, if we have secularism today in India without any problem, and that is purely because Indian mind has been shaped, formed by, informed by the Upanishadic thought. Had it not been for the Upanishadic thought, we would have behaved like some other religions would have behaved. We will never, and we can never behave as long as we are conscious. We can be open to every religion, because every religion has taken its refuge in India. No religion was left out. Every religion was given a shelter here in India, and that was possible because our thought was influenced by the Upanishadic thought. And today in the yoga world, we speak about practice, we speak about consciousness, we speak about panchakoshas, we speak about whole yoga philosophy is based on action, philosophy of action. Kriya Yoga, Ekatattva Abhyasa, Ashtanga Yoga. Everything is about doing. You can do something, only you have freedom of action. And the idea of freedom of action has been enshrined, firmly rooted in the Upanishadic wisdom. So in this way, I would say we are blessed to have the Upanishads as the bedrock of the entire thought tradition, practice tradition that has emerged in the whole world, in Eastern world, in India. And we should be eternally grateful to the rishis and the acharyas who brought it to us. So with this, I would like to offer it all that I have shared to the uh, greatness of the rishis, of a tradition of which we are all part of. One need not be an Indian. I mean, as long as we appreciate these thoughts being anywhere in this world, we are part of this tradition and we are part of this Rishi Parampara, this family, and we owe our gratitude, our respect, uh, our greatest reverence to this master for having preserved and brought this knowledge to all of us for the benefit of the humanity. Namaste. My apologies for the time, I mean for the delay.
I was just going to comment on that, that I don't think most of the participants didn't even notice that 2 hours had gone by. In fact, people are asking for more, and we can see that from the shower of blessings and words of appreciation that are flowing through. And looking at your presentation, we know that we could have sat here for not just the rest of the night, but also the whole week we could have sat and kept listening to you. So thank you very, very much. Bahu dhanyavadaha etadartham for these wonderful sharings all over again. Right through the presentation, I had two reactions. On one side, I was smiling away because of your childlike enthusiasm in communicating this knowledge that is so close to your heart, and to reach it out to people there so that people would go and actually start reading these texts. And on the other side, there was so much of depth in your knowledge. And though I've been like I say, a co-traveler, collaborator with you, never cease to get amazed at the spontaneity with which you are able to quote so many verses from the Upanishads, as well as share new ways of presenting them. So wonderful. Thank you very much. I think Hariji would like to say something before I continue.
Yeah. No, it was just, I don't know, I'm speechless. I'm so happy, actually. I'm exalted because, we have this, to all the people who are still tuned in and listening in, we have this platform, Advaita Academy, which was actually the first platform that we started, and it is focused on Vedanta, on traditional teachings of Vedanta. And so it's just, coming together of these two platforms, Indica Yoga and Advaita Academy. We did a oneness festival 2 months back, and we are doing this festival. And the way we are seeing this collaboration between the yoga and Advaita Academy, and the way it's panning out is just extraordinary. I mean, because not many yoga teachers, they'll take a little bit of Gita, they'll take Panchakosha, they'll take a little bit of from everything and sort of package it, because the primary focus is on yoga. So there's like 90% is yoga, and then 10% of the Jnana Marga. Whereas if you go to the traditional, for example, Chirmaya Mission or Puja Swami Dayananda Saraswati, there's 90% is Vedanta, and 10% if people are interested, they can do yoga also. What Shivananda Ashram was perhaps the first school which sort of had a combination of both the schools. And we actually want to bring that together because it's so important to bring authentic teachings of yoga and authentic teachings of Vedanta together. And I'm very happy that Vinaya is straddling both the worlds so effortlessly. That's the beauty. I mean, he's straddling Yoga Sutras and Upanishads and Gita and everything. So he's just an amazing thing. Not many people. I mean, I have interacted with several teachers, several gurus. Not many people can straddle both the worlds like how Vinaya does. So I'm very, very grateful to Vinaya for this amazing talk, first and foremost, and to bringing both these platforms together in the manner that we are aspiring to do. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Hariji. I would just like to read a few compliments before I move on to the questions. There was one very sweet one by Sarita ji who says that, where and why have you been hiding up to now? And as if almost in reply, Ramuji, a very senior sadhaka from the Vivekananda tradition, he's saying that Vidya dadati vinayam vinayad yati patratam patratva dhanam apnoti dhanam dharmam tataska. So true knowledge gives humility. And I think your name incarnates your attitude and also allows us to know, recognize the gem that is there within you. So very beautiful. Thank you very much. And I mean, like I said, the compliments are showering down. I will not be able to keep up, but I would do injustice if I did not read out some. So Veronica ji, who's been a very regular attendee, she's saying, as soon as you finish, she did a standing ovation for you. And so it's been, people have been deeply moved by your very insightful presentation. And the best part of it is that it has been done with such ease and with simplicity and with a lot of grace and enthusiasm. So I think we can go on and on. There are lots of adjectives that are getting added with every word that I'm saying. So I know you're not used to being showered publicly with so much of affection and recognition, but I think it's worth recognizing what you have and what you offer to the world yoga community. And as Hariji said, being able to seamlessly straddle the two worlds of Vedanta as well as of yoga, a rare, not so common combination that is there. I would just like to maybe just take on one or a few questions as they come up. I mean, there are lots of them that are there, but one question that was very important that Geeta ji had, Geeta Ramanna ji had put, she says that you made these stories come alive for us in the last 2 hours, and time went by without us realizing that we were being showered and literally being generously offered so much of deep wisdom. So she's saying that what percentage of these stories are there in our school texts? According to the age of kids, the stories should be included in the curriculum. If high school and 11th, 12th standard kids are able to absorb the values of these, it would have a huge positive impact on the future of each one of them, approach to life, competition, decision making, and thus our country, our thoughts. And what are your thoughts on this, please? I ask this because you've been on education committees, on important national and state level education committees. So what are your comments on this?
Well, I completely agree with her that it should be part of, any educational process. I was fortunate to go to Gurukulam, and that's where I had an opening. Like very few percentage of people would go beyond a regular or conventional mode of education. So at the moment, I realize, it's a tragedy that we are not able to bring it into the system of education to the extent that is needed. Maybe with a little more awakening, with a little more exposure to these thoughts, finally we need to arrive at that level. Look at for that matter. Even if you take the parliament building, if you look into it, you can see the quotations from the Upanishads, or the very statement, the motto of the Indian nation, Satyameva Jayate. Like that again comes from the Upanishad. Hardly I can see an area where Upanishads don't touch and impact. Yet somewhere like youngsters are being deprived of this knowledge, and that's what I mean. As Vivekananda says, like it's fearlessness. It's the uh, the assurance and the confidence, like no other text can give it like the Upanishads. So even in that interest, we should really ensure that how we should ensure that these reaches our youngsters and they can access that treasure within.
Yes. Also, maybe just a follow up to that is the way you've presented the stories. There seems to be very little of any religious component in it. So, since you've also been on the National Education Policy Committee, so how do you think that one could still try and bring these stories out in a manner that doesn't secularize them to the extent of making them uh, bereft of their essential sacrality? And how can we enable our youth and our people to really get this, uh, get the best of what the Indian civilization, of which these texts are foundational. So how in your exposure to the policy making can this really filter into our national fabric?
I think it's a very tricky question in the sense that uh, if we just go by right approach to things, it's not at all complicated. As you rightly mentioned, like take any story for that matter. What we generally consider as a religious approach, you can hardly find it in the Upanishads. I mean, they could be like when you're speaking about Nachiketa, Nachiketa could be a young boy of today in India, but he could also be a young boy somewhere in New York. I mean, the setting can change. Nothing else matters. So it's absolutely universal, liberating itself from the clutches of time and space and the cultural context. Though some of the other imageries might have a cultural context. So in that way, it is universal, already universal in nature. We did not do anything to secularize them. It's just that we need to have the right vision to look at them and appreciate from for what they offer. And if we are able to look into it in that manner, I think we can easily adopt them without any difficulty. In fact, they'll be the first texts and stories which are amenable to these representations.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's also the high regard that even Western scholars have had for these texts, and also scientists have had for these texts, that can act as a support or to be able to put these ideas into the education system. But I think maybe Hariji through Indic Academy, or maybe one can build a voice, not just, and maybe Indica Yoga can play a big role, not just a voice of the yoga community as such, not just the Indians, but maybe the world community at large can ask for these.
True. I mean, I think it's also happening in its own pace now, like compared to a decade ago or so, or 2 decades ago. The number of people who were exposed to Sanskrit was less. People who took interest in the studies of these texts were even lesser. Like there could be some traditional spaces where they were fully into it, but there are other spaces they're completely out of it. But today you have new spaces emerging, new kind of educational institutes, new platforms. Like Indica Academy considers itself to be a non-traditional university for traditional knowledge. So you have thousands, so I mean hundreds of videos at the moment, which will grow into thousands on Advaita Academy, where, and you can see if one course is offered, there are hundreds of people joining into it, registering it for these courses. So what we see is only hope and promise. So we have nothing to worry about. Of course, at the moment we feel okay, not many people are taking into it, but the truth of it, the I mean, by the sheer virtue of its own inherent qualities, this will be the walk of the future, and it has to be. We have no other option. Hariji, you wanted to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very sanguine, very hopeful about the future. I don't expect anything from the government. Frankly speaking, they take a lot of pride in the fact that they haven't touched anything, and So I'm not so hopeful of the government initiatives, but the sheer demand from the market, from people, is so high that technology enables us to reach out to the entire world. So I am very, very sanguine. I think that our time has come. So I am very bullish that in our own lifetimes, we will see a transformation. We will see a transformation in our lifetimes. Just because, see, the way to think about it is, if more than, say, we have a population of 7 billion people, more than 350 million people are doing yoga, for example, or meditation or something like that. So now there is an upasana part that is done, and they're ready for deeper inquiry, right? And so this need to go back to your past, to connect back to your past, is very, very deep. I mean, humans need to go back, even though, the modernity has come and we all think that, okay, I'm modern, I don't care about the past, I'm disconnected, all that is there. But if you see, every person wants to go back and anchor himself or herself to the tradition. There is a need. It's an inherent
The need for authenticity, which is the nature of the youth today.
Absolutely. And you see the global millennials today, they're only asking for authentic, so they're beyond all this, all this flaky stuff.
True.
So the sheer market forces will drive authenticity. Even in yoga, we have seen the extraordinary response that this festival had, which is a very unique festival, is primarily because people are tired of hearing all these, random and vague. Yesterday I was watching a Netflix series, and there was a goat yoga or something like that. So I didn't really understand what they were trying to do, but it's a big thing, I believe, in Texas. But there's a certain ennui set in, there's a certain tiredness set in, and they want deep, authentic stuff. Which is why I hope you're working on this program on 31st morning. We need to produce authentic teachers. And that's the thing. I mean, all this will only be happening if there's delivery from our side of authentic, transformative, and immersive teachers. That is the thing. So are we doing this on 31st?
Yes, 31st morning.
Great.
Would you like to just share?
I also would like to add some work that Subhuji is involved. Like there is an organization in Bangalore. I'm sure there'll be similar organization elsewhere also called Samvit. And what they're trying to do is to take yoga to hundreds of schools. They're scaling up every year. They have come up with a syllabus for schools, and Subhuji is actually mentoring that program, where in the third year of its inception itself, they have taken that program to maybe more than hundreds of schools. Subhuji, you want to add something there?
Yeah. Go ahead, please go ahead.
No, so in the similar way, like Samvit is on one such program, but there are many such initiatives happening outside the government, and that seems to be more steady and more long-lasting, and which will bring out transformative solutions, I guess. And I believe that is happening.
Yes, I think, do you want to just give in a word or two about the 31st thing so that people know, I mean, so
Sure.
that
Yeah.
prepared to participate?
This is a thought that we are holding very closely in our hearts in Indica Yoga and Indica to bring authentic programs. And one such program that we are looking at is an Yogacharya program. Okay, a very rigorous, a thorough, and a holistic teachers training program, which will look into all these aspects, of course, including the asana part, including the philosophy, with the grounding in, as Hariji has put it, in the science of well-being and the science of liberation. So Ayurveda is the science of well-being, and your Vedanta is the science of liberation. So combining these two wings, Yoga Atma and the two Puchas, the two Pakshas, on one side Vedanta and one side Ayurveda, and having a firm basis in the tradition, in the tradition which is constantly rejuvenating itself, not in static conditions. Okay, so basing that, we are planning for a Yogacharya program, which could be for a length of 10 to 12 months a residential program, and we have been thinking on these lines. We had already one brainstorming sessions with experts from across the world, and we are now thinking to bring the discussion once again on the 31st, the last day when we conclude this festival. On the morning, in the pre-final session, we are presenting on Yogacharya and have experts participate, and also our participants who have joined us, who have continued this Yoga Yatra for 40 days. We want them also to participate and share their feedback, inputs, insights for this. So that we will be presenting on the 31st. We'll also send out a document before that, and we would like to hear from all of you.
Yes, thank you for sharing more on that program. And I think another great success of your talk has been the fact that Hariji, another wonderful support and sponsor and the founder of this entire idea, has always been in the background. And your presentation has, inspired him to come forth and say that, yes, these initiatives, these people have to be promoted, and I will come and stand in the front of the stage and declare it loudly. So I think that's an enormous sign of the success of your presentation. And Hariji, thank you for sharing the inspiration behind why you're putting in this yeoman's effort into upholding the Vedic tradition in so many aspects. So
this will be a compliment which I'll definitely carry on my sleeve.
Okay, I would just like to read out some more compliments, Vinay, and then take
maybe questions.
No, but this is important because there are many who have, they put on their dittos to this particular comment by Veronica ji. Again, she's saying, Dr. Vinay, my deepest gratitude and admiration to wealth of knowledge that you have shared with us during these 30 days plus with so much generosity. Through the passion in your magistral presentation today, I could perceive your love and practice of yoga in your everyday life. Walking in the seer sandals, I extend my gratitude to your family who have shown yogi qualities in an elegant and subtle way by facilitating and giving us this precious time with you to allow us to learn and take away with us the benefits of the practice of many aspects of yoga and strive to be better at home and in our society. Thank you. So we have quite a few people. Gita ji also, who says that, there was depression when this lockdown set in, but this festival that has been curated has allowed them to find hope and meaning, which is what you were trying to convey so convincingly. Is the message of the Upanishads of Abhihi, be fearless. It's not so much the courage aspect rather than being fearless, which is what Swami Vivekananda, he stresses on again and again. And that was by Rabindranath ji, Rabindranath ji, he's been wanting to share some important things. And today he said, yes, this is what you've spoken on, the importance of life, you've spoken on. So it was, I think, a very pivotal session in many, many ways. I would just like to read out Dr. Radhakrishnan's quote on the Upanishads. He says, anyone who reads the Upanishads in the original Sanskrit will be caught up and carried away by the elevation, the poetry, the compelling fascination of the many utterances through which they lay bare the secret and sacred relations of the human soul and the ultimate reality. So your deep connection is also through your grounding in the Sanskrit language, which allows you to literally relish every single word that captures an entire philosophy in this. But the question that I would like to ask to you that follows from here is that, where I'll just tell you, saying that, Binita ji saying, how can we reflect on what we read in texts like the Upanishads or the Yoga Sutras? So there is a philosophical content, but how do we make this practical or experiential rather than theoretical reading of the Upanishadic text? Can you suggest some methods and practices?
Well, I can just tell what worked for me, and that might give you some hint also. Upanishads are not the text something that you want to read from end to end. Of course, once you can do that just to know what all it's speaking about, but then just take one verse, one part of the verse, just allow that to speak for you. Keep on thinking about it, reciting it. Just stay with that thought for some time, maybe a day or a little more, maybe some more time for a week. And that is good enough. One need not study the entire text end to end. That's not at all necessary. And even the Upanishad texts are not like that. Like Yoga Sutra, of course, you can see a sequential flow of thought, and you need to read it in its entirety to understand what it is speaking about. But Upanishads belong to a different age, belongs to a different mind, where reaching and hitting the truth of the existence was more important than trying to assimilate them, systematize them, and present it in the form of a long test. Sometimes they're so abrupt. For example, in Kena Upanishad, you have two parts, the first and the second. The first one speaks about the nature of the senses, the mind, the capacity of the senses to comprehend reality. And at the second part, you have a completely different story which is thrown at you, and you don't know what to make of it. And it doesn't even bother to explain. This is the beauty of Upanishad. It's just like, this is truth. You make sense of it. So it throws a story at you saying, okay, the gods were having a party after they won a war, and some unknown personality, one who was very charming, enters in, and all the gods who had assembled, they are really curious to know who has come in. So Agni goes to, Agni, Varuna, Agni, Vayu, and Indra, they come together. They just have some chit chat, and Indra asks Agni to go. So Agni goes to find out, comes back without knowing. Then Vayu goes, and he is also not able to find out. When Indra goes, that person vanishes completely. He's no more there. And you just start wondering what this makes to you. Even now, not sorry. Initially, it had really, I couldn't make any sense of it. It just dealing with it, staying with it for a while, then connecting with other dots. Okay, Indra represents the spiritual mind or the illumined mind, which can be egoistic in nature, which can also have that higher pedestal of operation. Agni refers to the speech. Vayu refers to something else. So when you look into these psychological and symbolic dimensions, then you can see how that story is trying to present the same idea that is there in the first chapter. Speech cannot comprehend reality. Sense cannot comprehend reality. A lower mind cannot comprehend reality. It's only when the illumination happens, that is your experience. There's nothing more to comprehend. Right? So this is brought about by the story. In the first sense, no way you cannot understand it. It's just stay with it. That's good enough. Just engage with it. It's like the cow chewing the cud. It has eaten, and again later it wants to bring it out and keep on engaging. So that's way, because the presence of the stories make it more lively. Chew the cud, and that will be helpful. And one of the Upanishads itself says, charai veti, keep on doing it. And that's helpful.
Yes, and I think now for this charai veti, there is a demand also. So Sridharji is saying great immersion into the Upanishad ocean. Let us continue swimming in it, and by getting it into the deep sea dive. So again, we had also got Gabby.
But I also would like to say, just confirm. See, I still have some places where Ishavasya Upanishad is not clear to me. Like I am engaged with that Ishavasya Upanishad for more than 20 years now. But still, when it speaks about Sambhuti, Asambhuti, Vidya and Avidya, there's something really revolutionary that Ishavasya Upanishad is trying to speak about. So, just stay with it. I don't have an answer today, but I'll find an answer.
So we've all had the opportunity of Shravanam today. I guess then it will next go logically to the next step of Mananam, where we have to contemplate upon it. So we've got to hear it, now contemplate upon it. And I'm sure that the results will also emerge. And also just wanted to share about this, the School of Practical Philosophy and Economic Science. The way they do some of this is they'll just take one line, one sentence from the Upanishad and contemplate on it for the entire week as a group. And they will see in what ways that one line can be reflected and manifested in their daily activities. So when Vinita ji was asking, that could be another way of doing it, that you just take up one line, live with it, make it your daily companion, moment to moment companion, and see what emerges as a result of it, right? There was another I was just also trying to let you know that we also had Gabby Gillison from the European Union of Yoga, which has been a collaborating organization, important collaborating organization for this Global Festival of Yoga. We are extremely grateful for the wholehearted support that we have received from these wonderful, important organizations in their respective areas. So the European Union of Yoga, of which Gabby is the president, and she's also the chairman of the Irish Yoga Association. So Gabby has been a very strong support for this program, and also a lot of the other senior teachers have participated.
And personally a mentor too.
And personally a guide and a mentor for us. And then we've also had the Global Peace Initiative of Women, the women that has also been a tremendous support by providing us a global community of scholars, of very big scholars, practitioners, etc. We've had the Indian Yoga Association, and we've also had the Center for Soft Power that has in fact commissioned and also helped the production of the Namami Yoga Vidya inspired performance. So Vinay, one more question for you, please. This is a little bit of a tricky one here, a little bit. So Ramakrishna ji is saying, he says, what is your view on Arun Shoriji's book, Hinduism, Essence and Consequence, where, I mean, I'll elaborate that question a little bit, I'll extend it, but he's saying that in a text like this, he is talking about the fact that, the word Brahma and Atman and all are used as, he says that they're like black holes and anybody can interpret them in any way they want. So we have attempted reinterpretations of these texts through a modern lens, which bring out a different kind of a different shade of the term. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts. I mean, we'd all love to hear how would you understand and explain this?
Hariji,
yeah, I think I'm not sure when Arun has written this book. So I think it is more a political kind of an approach towards his, I mean, in the recent past, his thoughts are quite different from, he wrote in 1977. Well, I mean, I wouldn't like to comment on that, frankly speaking. That might be his view.
Yes.
Basically, Vedanta has to be unfolded by a guru. So anybody who comments on Vedanta also has to have some kind of a grounding in the traditional knowledge. So if you approach it from an academic point of view, as a dry academic point of view, it's an experiential transformative knowledge. It's a pramana for self-knowledge. And this is not something that can be observed as an academic. So if somebody has written it as an academic, then it's best that we just respect that view and leave it at that. If you're a seeker, then I would advise you to study gurus like Chinmayananda, Puja Swami Dayananda Saraswati. There are several gurus, Swami Vivekananda, and then understand from them. That's a better thing to do.
I agree with Harikiranji. One, I have not read the book, so I'm in no position to comment on what the book speaks about. And the second part is, it's not just the Vedanta or the concepts of Atman and Brahman. If someone is keen, they can distort any knowledge or any concept for that matter. We have been witness to some of the distortions that are happening in the yoga world itself. I mean, we feel pain, like we were in one of the roundtable discussions on Yoga Sutra in one of the Western universities, where the presenter was saying that it also speaks about Raja Yoga, Raja, the word connected with power. I mean, see, the modern civilization, especially that emerged in the West in a certain context of history, there is a predominant focus of power. See everything in the lens of power. So they were interpreting the Yoga Sutra text also, yoga tradition also in the terms of power. Just because the word Raja is used, where one of the interpretation could be of kingly or royal, and there is some distant relationship of power politics. They want to look at it at the Yoga Sutra text also about the power and exploitation of power. And I can see in some of the, I'm pained, that's why I'm sharing it. I can see in a couple of American universities where you are having conferences on yoga and sexual violence. I mean, just to as though to point out to say that, okay, yoga invariably involves sexual violence. I'm not denying there could have been cases, there could have been completely unwarranted situations, and despite this, I mean, yoga has nothing to do. Like wherever there is power, there has been exploitation. Wherever someone holds a power position, they might have attempted to misuse it. So there's no direct connection with the yoga in that way. But when one looks at all these things in a very dry manner, from a very academic manner, I think the whole understanding, interpretation varies a lot. That's why this had come up in our morning session also with Zoltan. We need to have a scholar practitioner perspective. And if you ask Vedanta, if you ask Upanishad, it very clearly says, Sa Guru Meva Bhigachet Samitpani Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam. These two qualities it refers to as a teacher, Shrotriya and Brahmanishta. Shrotriya, well learned. Okay, that must be there. One must be well trained into this system. But also Brahmanishtam, one who has that sincerity, one who has that integrity of thought and action. I think these two qualities are necessary towards whom we can all approach and seek answers. Yes.
I have a question to ask before Anuji takes over again, because it's difficult to get the chance back from her once she starts. So this is regarding, we talk of the Shad Darshanas, the 6 Darshanas, the schools of philosophy, the Indian schools of philosophy which are there. And in that, we see Vedanta, the Uttamimamsa, to be one of those, where the Upanishadic ideas and of course Brahma Sutra of Vedavyasa, that forms for even the Brahma Sutra, it is Upanishad, which is the base we see. And also yoga as a darshana, yoga darshana of Patanjali, based on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, is also there. So today, in the context of yoga and what we practice and teach and everywhere, we have of course taken a lot of Upanishadic teachings in the yoga teachings also, like the Panchakosha concept, which is not there in the context of Yoga Darshana of Patanjali, or probably in Sankhya and other things also. But we are using it in today's schools of yoga very well. In fact, Panchakosha is very important concept, which is of course from the Upanishad. So this cross reference of course happens today. But in those traditional perspective we see, for example, we would see sometimes each school having differences between each other, and then in the other school, like they keep it as a Purva Paksha and try to have some oppositions of some ideas, and then they try to prove that this school is the best. So these kind of things also we see. So of course, definitely we understand, that we need to get all this together and take it. But even the traditional perspective, we see these differences. How do you look into this, and or how do you guide us to take in what perspective of these aspects? So yoga as a darshana and Vedanta as a darshana of Upanishads. So how do they go? Well, there's one question. Second, of course, you also mentioned about the minor Upanishads, which are called Yoga Upanishads, which are there. So are these Yoga Upanishads in philosophy, are they connected to the Yoga Darshana of Patanjali and probably to Sankhya, or are they also in a way connecting to the major Upanishads thought flow of Vedanta?
Thank you for asking that question. In fact, I would say that even the difference that the Vedanta tradition and the yoga tradition shares, and that is debated again fearlessly. If you look at the Brahma Sutra, you have a specific sutra which says Etena Yoga Pratyuktaha. By this we reject yoga. I mean, that's the sutra, one of the sutras of the 555 Brahma Sutras that you can come across.
Exactly.
Where Shankara writes a detailed, beautiful commentary. He says, what aspect of yoga do we reject? What aspect of yoga do we want to follow and we want to uphold? He says, at the surface, or the way it appears, yoga emerges from the Sankhyan framework, which is dualistic in nature. And anything that has to do with dualism, Vedanta rejects. Upanishad rejects. I mean, look at the Kathopanishad itself. Neha nanasti kinchana. There is no many. Mrutyosam mrutyumapanoti. It says he goes to death again and again, repeated cycles of birth and death. Who sees duality? So there is no duality in it. I mean, this is one statement you can see across the Upanishads. No Upanishad has any kind of hesitation that there is no, to say that there is no duality. Like they just make it very clear that this is non-dual in nature. The reality is non-dual. So the ultimate reality is only one. It cannot be two ultimate realities as the Sankhya views, as Purusha as an ultimate reality, Prakriti as an ultimate reality. The way Vedanta reconciles, see, Vedanta reconciles every school of thought. It reconciles Purusha and Prakriti, the Sankhyan school of thought, into Prakriti as an expression of the Purusha, not as an independent reality. So, in the commentary, Shankara says the dualistic nature of the yoga school is what we reject, but we keep the sadhana aspect. When it comes to sadhana, we regard the approach of the yoga with highest regard. No compromise on that. So, even the difference between the yoga and the Vedanta school is also influenced and informed by Upanishads, I would say. So, it seeks for unity where it is possible and rejects the aspect which is not amenable to it. But it's not the only thing. This also brings us to our next question, the later part, where you can see there have been again, our tradition, it's not a stagnant tradition. There has been continuous attempts to grow and outgrow itself. And there have been multiple attempts even in the form of text. For example, the text of Shiva Samhita is an attempt to bring together yoga and the Vedanta tradition. Shiva Samhita belongs to somewhere around 15th century. So you can see how Vedantic thoughts seem to have been imposed on yoga. Like you can call it as not so successful attempt. You can see both the thoughts coming together, but somewhere a little bit of artificiality is there. But you go further, how though yoga started with Sankhya, it seems to slightly developed a liking for the Vedanta tradition. See the culmination or the maximum blooming happening in Brahman. What's his name?
Yoga
No. Yoga Vasishta is one text, but of course, in the later times, Jairamanji presented before us, who is also one of the commentators on the Yoga Sutra.
Jyotsna, Brahmananda's Jyots.
Jairam, brother.
Yeah.
Sadashiva Brahmendra.
Sadashiva Brahmendra.
Yes.
Sadashiva Brahmendra has written a commentary and Sadashiva Brahmendra was one of the greatest Vedantic masters of the recent times. And he has written a commentary on Yoga Sutra and bringing out or supporting it with the insights. I mean, this is one of the experiential commentaries on Yoga Sutra. We have Bhoja Prabandha, Bhoja commentary and all, but they seem to be more academic in nature. But when it comes to his commentary, like that mostly comes from an experiential background. So again, you see yoga and Vedanta coming together, and they have to come together because Vedanta offers a very firm ontological framework, an ontological framework which is at once universal in nature. It can incorporate any tradition into it while taking the best part of it and also staying to itself. Therefore, it can take the sadhana aspect from yoga and integrate. Therefore, yoga and Vedanta will go together. They have to go together. And also in terms of, I have a very interesting idea that today we are in the Sankhyan phase of development in the whole world, where the Prakriti matter has started to come together. The way artificial intelligence, the way the way you can see intelligence emergence in the material world and bringing all the matter together. Your phone speaks to your fridge speaks to the supermarket, your supermarket speaks to your doctor. I mean, this is how the matter is getting integrated today. And you see the matter integration that has happened in the Sankhyan phase. So from the Sankhyan phase, we move on to the yoga phase. That's why there's so much awakening and interest in the yoga. And from the yoga phase, we will eventually we'll move on to the Vedantic phase, where the matter and spirit get integrated. Spirit and spirit, like everything gets integrated into one thought, and this unity will be again established in a very firm, in fact, more firm than it was in all the other ages, and it is bound to happen.
It's a very profound message of hope that you have given us, and this message of hope is also reflected in Arthur Schopenhauer's quote on the Upanishads, where he says that From every sentence, deep, original, and sublime thoughts arise, and a high and holy and earnest spirit pervades the whole. In the whole world, there is no study so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. They are destined sooner or later to become the faith of the people. And my personal question there is, you also, in passing, mentioned that the Upanishadic culture will not or doesn't have the dangers of becoming like a religion, a sectarian, doesn't have the dangers of having the sectarianism in its expression to people. So would you like to just share a little bit more on that? Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
I touched upon few points in the earlier presentation, but if I need to add, I just need to say that what it highlights is your experience, the individual's experience. And the moment any tradition emphasizes on individual experiences, it's actually liberating you from the clutches of the book and the belief. See, the problem comes when you are asked to believe in something and your belief can clash with the other belief. But the moment you take the whole discussion into a completely different field of experience, each experience is valid. How can I deny your experience? Your experience is valid to you, my experience is valid to me. Look at the Vedic seers and their representations in various mandalas and various places. There is a same experience or a similar incident. For example, the one that you generally refer to, where the cows are stolen and the panis have taken into the caves and they are hiding them. The Sarama, the hound, the divine hound goes looking after it. Then Indra comes and releases them. There is a battle and Indra releases them. This is a story. But this story has been narrated in 20, 30 different times in different places in different ways. The detail varies from one to the other. So what actually are we trying to do? I mean, someone from a very superficial understanding say, oh, they are all incongruent, they don't match with one another. But that is such a holistic understanding of the text. But what one needs to look into is how each one is bringing out his own experience or his story. See, in an experiential world, how I overcame my darkness is so important. Because by overcoming the darkness in this cave, I've actually did something for humanity. There might be darkness in other caves. Therefore, there are other seers who have looked into that aspect of the darkness. So that darkness can be of 1,000 expressions. And similarly, overcoming could be of 1,000 expressions. Or Hariji also uses this statement, and I find it very apt here. He says, again, this is in a different context, but nevertheless, this statement holds. He says, we have been bled by 1,000 cuts and we need to heal in all those ways. Okay, so there could be 1,000 and odd ways of healing, and there could be 1,000 and odd narrations. So I am an individual seeker. I am working my way out. I have overcome few. Or if you look at a relay race, okay, when you just join the relay race in between, you never know which one is in which track, who is winning. The first person whom you see in the forefront, you might think that he's the one who is ahead and winning the race, but he might just be in the previous lap, while others might be finishing the next lap. So we never know what one's trajectory is. Each trajectory, each position is valid for them at that point, and Vedanta allows this possibility. Therefore, we don't speak of religious tolerance in the Vedantic tradition, because Vedantic religion, we feel religious tolerance is a very negative concept. The very idea, if I say, I'm tolerating all you people here, I don't think you will be flattered with that compliment. If I say I'm tolerating you, because it means that somehow we have to stay together. That's why we are sticking on. The moment there is a possibility, either I want to throw you out or I want to escape, right? But Vedanta brings about the idea of universal acceptance. Your path is valid for you. My path is valid for me. This is a completely different level of engagement than saying, I tolerate your religion. No, we don't want to tolerate other religion. We want to accept your path is valid. Your belief system is valid for you. Don't impose it on me. Similarly, I don't want to impose it on you. And this is possible only in the Vedantic culture. Otherwise, it's too difficult. Like any other culture has to really try to overcome the gravitational pull of the past to arrive at this understanding. And Vedanta makes it easier, simpler, and at once logical to have this position.
Very, very poignantly presented. I mean, these were ideas that are not always so easy to express, but you have put it in a manner that helps us understand some of the stark differences between different worldviews, different ways of looking at who we are, how we deal with knowledge, how we relate to other cultures and their knowledge traditions. Just one other thing, if I may add, there is the fact that there are yogis, true yogis in every culture, in every religious tradition, has had its seekers, mystics of truth. And like one Ramuji again said, he says that in order to arrive at that, one has to ruminate to be rumi. So I guess if one sits with these ideas, then one will find the common underlying synergy and commonality between us rather than the differences that are emphasized on. And also that academicians today are trying to insert that divisive mentality sometimes, unfortunately, in things. So Vinayji, we could go on and on. We have Abhay Singhji saying, his eyes are getting moistened, listening to your the truth in your feelings and expressions. So I think it's been a very moving session for many. You have literally not just wet people's eyes, but playing on the word wet, you have whetted many people's appetites to plunge into the Upanishads. And I think that is your personal mission as well, to get people to say that don't just listen, don't just stop at listening to this. Please take that next step and pick up an Upanishad, even if it's a translation to start with, but at least allow yourselves to be touched by the truth of these texts. And if there is a mystery, it allows for exploration, but allow yourself to explore that. And again, I know from there that there are a few groups in Ireland, dear friends, many of them who attended the session as well. They have actually they formed Upanishadic study circles inspired by the workshops that you have conducted. So sincerely hope that this message goes round the world several times, and we have as a flowering of this this festival and your session, we have different groups that will just get the desire to start trying to understand the Upanishads firsthand, and then take it further from there. So we could go on, but I think it's time that I would have to. We've reached the lucky number of 108. It's a very auspicious number to look ahead. So with the rich foundation that you have laid for us of the Upanishadic truths, we look ahead to see what more this festival has to offer in the last few days that are remaining. And we can assure you that we've tried to uphold a certain standard, a certain authenticity in the different teachings. They've come in different formats, through different voices, from different regions of the earth. But what we are trying to share with you is somewhere the spark, as Vinay was saying, the spark that has spoken through and lit different candles around the world. So I would like to request Koti Rampasaji to please share tomorrow's sessions. All right. So as we wait for that, I'd just like to read that we've had many dear friends and also presenters who've been with us. So Raghu Anantanarayanji also is very appreciative. He says, brilliant, thanks, Vinay. So just the praises are coming forth still. And I would just also maybe as we wait for the poster to come up, I would just like to read out a comment by Anita ji, because that relates to our tomorrow's morning session, where she's saying that the bridge will need to be built. When we are thinking of how can we reach out this knowledge to the other people, so she's saying that the bridge will need to be rebuilt. First, between parents, teachers, mentors, and the children of the younger generations to learn, understand, and imbibe the teachings of the ancient scripts. Educating the parents is just as important as educating the children. The concepts and teachings are timeless, but they have been forgotten and need a revival. It is unfortunate that the 21st century youngsters in India seem to be losing their basic inherent Indian values and traditions faster than the ones in the Western countries. I picked up this quotation, comment of Anita ji's because tomorrow morning we have a session by Professor Girishwar Mishra ji. He was the former Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya in Barda. But before that, he has his main career has been as a professor of psychology at the Delhi University, where he has tried very hard to inject the mainstream teaching of psychology with Indic perspectives. And he forms part of one of the founding father group, founding father parent, founding, I won't say fathers because of the the gender bias in it, but the founding group or the team that was looking at how you can bring Indian perspectives into the field of psychology. So he's going to be speaking to us on educational paradigm in and yogic wisdom. So do tune in the morning to listen to how we can probably bring in these insights into education. And since he's been associated with policy makers, I think we'll have a few things to learn. I mean, many things to learn from there. In the evening, we have another brilliant session by Gauranga Das Prabhu. He is the director and strategy and he's the director of strategy and collaborations of the Govardhan Eco Village, an amazing community project in Maharashtra, which is trying to apply the values of the Vedic tradition in a day-to-day basis. And they formed a very, very inspiring community that you must try and visit sometime. And I'm sure after listening to him, many of you will be keen to go and have a first-hand experience of that remarkable community. I had the great fortune of being there a few weeks ago before the lockdown hit us. So he's going to be talking on yoga and ecology, the story of Govardhan Eco Village. So with these words, Vinayji, back to you. Do tell us how we can continue learning from you. I'm not just going to say how can people contact you from a one-time, mail that somebody sends, but there have been requests for you to hold regular sessions from Indica Yoga, weekly sessions. So tell us how we can reach out to you, Indica Yoga, and take this work forward that you have sparked in us.
And also a parting message. He asks every speaker, he has to give one parting message.
Yeah, we're coming to that. We're coming to that.
I think we have many ambitious plans from Indica platform. So please stay tuned for us on Indica Yoga and all the other platforms of Indica. We'll be announcing some courses, online courses, and also we are planning much more. So all will be unfolding soon. So please stay connected with us. Easiest way of connecting is connect with us on the Facebook, Indica Yoga page, and you can personally, I'm there as Vinayachandra Banavathy. You can connect with me there. And also we have our website, www.indicayoga.com. That's the other way of connecting and following our work. YouTube channel is there, Indica Yoga YouTube. So all these are the channels and platforms where you can easily connect with us. This is one. And before taking up, you have already mentioned what would be my message or an answer to that question. But before that, I would like to once again thank all my family members and all my gurus and mentors. I took the names in the beginning. Again, I always remember them with gratitude. And also, personally, I'm indebted to you because in our journeys, we have learned a lot, helped each other a lot in growing and understanding. So I'm grateful to you and your family and all the other friends and families of the larger Indica family that's there here, and my Veda Vijnana Gurukulam family, and many other, the Manisha family. These are various families that I'm part of. So I'm ever grateful to all of them. And the last message, or a request rather than a message, it is a request that if there is an outcome for this session, that should be engaging with the Upanishads in whichever format that you think it's feasible for you. So please engage with it. It's like Kamadhenu, as Krishna himself, I mean, as you can see in the beginning of the Gita Dhyana Shloka, Upanishado Gavaha. So Upanishads are the cows from which the Gita Amrita also comes out. So they are the Kamadhenus, they are the bestowers of everything that one can seek for, and they have so much of wisdom. You mine it and you still get more and more of it. You can never feel enough of it. So please form your own study circles. If you're interested, keen to study, there are multiple ways. In fact, this was one of the questions that were come: where to start, how to study. So if you're looking at one of the Upanishads to begin with, Katha Upanishad, because that's my personally favorite Upanishad. But even otherwise, it is a holistic Upanishad in many ways. It's complete. So you can start with it, you can engage with it. Eknath Ishwaran, Anuji mentioned, is one of the finest writers. You can look into it. You can look into Swami Ranganathananda, whose book on the message of the Upanishads is available. Not just the book, just a very short introduction which he has written, The Power and Charm of the Upanishad. It's so powerful. It, it can never cease without transforming you. The moment you hold your hands on it, it will have its effect. So look into it. Sri Aurobindo has written, maybe one needs a little more exposure into Sri Aurobindo's writing, and then you need to look into his writings on the Upanishads. But Swami Vivekananda, the recent one is Swami Ranganathananda, Eknath Ishwaran, all these, each text is a gem. Just take it up, randomly you pick it up, make use of it. In fact, Dialogue with Death of Eknath Ishwaran is a beautiful book. So you can start there, but let something come out of this. Start engaging. If you're a general enthusiast, enter into Vedanta. If you're a yoga teacher, you definitely need to enter into Vedanta and Upanishads. Without the basis of the Upanishads and the Vedantic tradition, yoga is incomplete. This would be my humble request, that please start engaging with the Upanishads. They'll speak a lot to each one of you.
And Vinay, a personal one from my side is that if you had to pick up maybe any one line or quotation from the Upanishad, what would that be?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I think I came across this statement from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad recently, but still at the moment, it is really holding a lot of sway on me. Yuje vam brahma purvyam namobhi vishloka etu purvasya suhan patheva surehe. So that verse which says shunvantu vishve amritasya putraha. I think this is still actually holding me. So definitely, yeah, that would be the statement for me. Shunvantu vishve amritasya putraha.
Amritasya putraha. So listen, oh.
The sons of immortality.
And here the word sons is not masculine gender. It's just the children of immortality.
Children of immortality. I unite my mind and prana in the highest. I can just say this is my current engagement. So, but any day I'll go back to Katha Upanishad as an Upanishad that is there.
I think that's a very lofty call for all of us, and a reminder that we could either sleep on tonight and dream wonderful dreams of immortality, or if people are there in the afternoon listening to that, it's a lovely way to lead the rest of your afternoon and evening. For those who are there in the morning, let the seed grow in your inner soil and bear very rich fruits. So with these few words, Vinayji, thank you very much for having done this sharing. Thank you, Hariji, also. Thank you, the great audience that has held through 3 hours of absolute immersion in the simplicity of your of the Upanishadic presentation. So, Bahu Dhanyavadaha, deeply indebted.
Pranams to all gurus.